Chapter 1. The Offer in the Shadows. The castle felt different now, Harry thought, as he stared up at the darkened ceiling of the hospital wing. Even the familiar enchanted stars seemed dim, their light struggling against the weight of what had happened only hours before. The third task. The graveyard. Cedric's lifeless eyes, staring up at nothing. Harry turned onto his side, wincing as his ribs protested the movement. Madame Pomfrey had done her best with the cuts and bruises, but some wounds ran deeper than broken skin. The silence in the infirmary was oppressive, broken only by the distant murmur of voices from the corridors beyond. Students were still awake, he knew. How could anyone sleep after Dumbledore's announcement? Lord Voldemort has returned. The words echoed in Harry's mind like a death knell. He pulled the thin blanket closer around his shoulders, though it did nothing to ward off the chill that had settled deep in his bones. Tomorrow, the other schools would leave. Tomorrow, life would attempt to return to normal. But Harry knew better now. Normal was an illusion he could never again afford to believe in. "You are awake." The voice, quiet and accented, came from the darkness near the infirmary entrance. Harry bolted upright, his hand instinctively reaching for his wand before he recognized the speaker. Viktor Krum stepped into the pale moonlight streaming through the tall windows, his usually confident posture subdued. "Viktor," Harry's voice came out as barely more than a whisper. "What are you doing here?" The Bulgarian champion moved closer, his footsteps careful and measured. In the dim light, Harry could see the tension etched across Victor's features, worry lines that hadn't been there during the tournament, a tightness around his dark eyes that spoke of sleepless hours. "I couldn't sleep," Viktor said simply, stopping beside Harry's bed. "I keep thinking about what happened tonight, about what it means." Harry looked away, focusing on his hands twisted in the blanket. "You heard Dumbledore's speech." "I heard more than his speech." Victor's voice dropped lower, barely audible above the whisper of wind against the windows. "I heard my headmaster, Karkaroff. He was, how do you say, frantic, pacing his chambers like a caged animal, muttering about old loyalties and older debts." The words sent a chill down Harry's spine. Igor Karkaroff, the former Death Eater, who had traded names for his freedom. If Voldemort had truly returned. "He knows something," Harry said, and it wasn't a question. Viktor nodded grimly. "He knows that the Dark Lord remembers those who betrayed him. Karkaroff gave names to your ministry, yes? To save his own skin." "Now." He shrugged, a gesture that somehow conveyed the weight of inevitability. "Now he will pay for that choice. What does this have to do with me?" But even as Harry asked the question, he felt the familiar knot of dread tightening in his stomach. It always came back to him, didn't it? Every shadow that fell across the wizarding world somehow traced back to the boy who lived. Viktor was quiet for a long moment, studying Harry with an intensity that made him want to look away. When he finally spoke, his words were careful, deliberate. "In Bulgaria, they've whole ways of seeing things that your British ministry does not. Our auras, they watch, they listen. They know that something has been stirring in the shadows for months now. Death Eaters gathering, old allegiances being renewed." Victor's jaw tightened. "And they know that you, Harry Potter, are at the center of it all." "I didn't ask to be," Harry said, the words coming out sharper than he intended. "No," Viktor agreed softly, "but that does not change the reality. You are in danger here. More danger than I think even you realize." Harry let out a bitter laugh. "I think I have a pretty good idea. Thanks. I was there tonight, remember? I saw him come back. I watched Cedric die because of me." "Cedric died because of Voldemort," Viktor corrected firmly. "But you survived because you are stronger than you know. I'm stronger than they want you to realize." There was something in Viktor's tone that made Harry look up, meeting the older wizard's gaze directly. Viktor's dark eyes were steady, determined, and filled with something that took Harry a moment to identify: conviction. "There is something I must tell you," Viktor continued, glancing toward the infirmary doors as if checking for listeners. "Something I have been thinking about since the moment you returned with Diggory's body, since I saw the fear in Karkaroff's eyes." Harry waited, his heart hammering against his ribs. "In Bulgaria," Viktor said slowly, "they have laws. Old laws but strong ones. Laws that protect those who seek sanctuary from persecution, from those who would use them as, what is the word, pawns in a larger game." "Viktor, what are you saying?" "I am saying that you do not have to stay here, Harry Potter." The words hung in the air between them, heavy with possibility and consequence. "I am saying that if you wanted, if you chose, you could come with me, to Bulgaria. My family, they have influence there, connections. They could keep you safe." Harry stared at him, certain he had misheard. You're offering me asylum?" "I am offering you a choice," Viktor said quietly. "A chance to live your life without constantly looking over your shoulder, without being someone's weapon in a war you never chose to fight." The silence that followed was deafening. Harry's mind raced, trying to process what Viktor was suggesting. Leave Britain, leave Hogwarts, leave everything he had ever known, leave his friends. "I can't," he whispered. "Ron, Hermione, but they're here. This is my home." "Home should be a place where you are safe," Viktor replied. "Is Hogwarts that place for you, really? After tonight, after everything that has happened, do you truly feel safe here?" Harry opened his mouth to say yes, to insist that Hogwarts was the only real home he had ever known, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, he found himself thinking of all the times the castle's protection had failed him: the basilisk in the Chamber of Secrets, the Dementors on the Quidditch pitch, the false Mad-Eye Moody who had spent months manipulating him, preparing him to be delivered to Voldemort like a gift-wrapped present. "This is not a decision you need to make tonight," Viktor said gently, seeing the conflict written across Harry's features. "But think about it. Please, because I do not believe you will get many more chances to choose for yourself." That's when Harry heard it, the soft creak of a floorboard near the entrance to the infirmary. Both boys froze, and Harry caught Viktor's eye, seeing his own alarm reflected there. "Harry!" Hermione's voice, worried and questioning, drifted through the darkness. "Are you all right? I saw someone come in here and—" She stepped into the moonlight, her bushy hair loose around her shoulders and her eyes wide with concern. When she spotted Viktor standing beside Harry's bed, her expression shifted from worry to confusion to something else entirely. "Understanding." "Hermione," Harry started, but she held up a hand to stop him. "I heard," she said simply. "Not all of it, but enough." Viktor straightened, and Harry could see the tension in his shoulders. "No, Miss Granger, I did not mean for you to overhear you offering Harry a way out." Hermione stepped closer, her clever eyes moving between the two boys. "To overhear you giving him something no one else has bothered to offer? A choice?" The sharpness in her voice surprised Harry. This wasn't the Hermione who always deferred to authority, who trusted in the wisdom of teachers and the system. This was someone harder, older than her 15 years. "You think it's a good idea?" Harry asked, though part of him already knew what she would say. Hermione had always been the one to see patterns, to analyze situations from angles others missed. She was quiet for a moment, her gaze distant as she processed what she had heard. When she looked at Harry again, her brown eyes were bright with unshed tears and something that looked remarkably like grief. "I think," she said carefully, "that Viktor is right. About one thing, at least. You won't get many more chances to choose for yourself. After tonight, After what Dumbledore announced, the war is going to start in earnest, and you're going to be at the center of it, whether you want to be or not. Hermione, no, Harry, let me finish. Her voice was steady now, resolved. I've been thinking about it too, ever since we got back from the graveyard, about how you ended up there, about how someone entered your name in the goblet, and how we just accepted it, how we always just accept it when terrible things happen to you. She turned to Viktor, and Harry was startled to see something like gratitude in her expression. What exactly are you offering? She asked. Viktor looked between them, his expression serious. Sanctuary. Real sanctuary, not the illusion of safety you have here. My family owns estates in the mountains, guarded by magic that goes back centuries. The Bulgarian ministry has no love for your Dark Lord or his followers. They would not easily give up someone under their protection. And Harry would be... what? A refugee? A political prisoner? He would be free, Viktor said simply. Free to learn magic, without fearing for his life. Free to make friends, without worrying about putting them in danger. Free to choose his own path instead of having it chosen for him. Hermione nodded slowly, as if Viktor's words confirmed something she had already been thinking. How long would we have to decide? Wer? Viktor raised an eyebrow. Or you don't think I'd let him go alone, do you? Hermione's tone was matter-of-fact, as if the question of her accompanying Harry had never been in doubt. Wherever Harry goes, I go. That's just how it is. Harry felt something tight in his chest loosen slightly. Whatever else happened, whatever choice he made, he wouldn't have to make it alone. The Durmstrang ship leaves tomorrow evening, Viktor said. After the farewell feast. If you decided to come, it would have to be then. That's not much time, Harry said. No, Viktor agreed. But time is something you may not have much of, regardless. Karkaroff is not the only one who knows what Voldemort's return means. Your enemies will be looking for ways to reach you, and your friends... He paused, choosing his words carefully. Your friends may not always be able to protect you from those who claim to have your best interests at heart. Harry knew without asking that Viktor was talking about Dumbledore, the headmaster who had kept so many secrets, who had allowed Harry to walk into danger, again and again, in the name of some greater purpose. I need to think, Harry said finally, about all of this. Of course. Viktor stepped back from the bed, his expression understanding. But do not take too long, and do not tell anyone else about this conversation. Not yet. There are those who would try to prevent you from leaving, if they knew. He moved toward the infirmary entrance, then paused and looked back. For what it is worth, he said quietly, I believe you deserve better than being someone's weapon. You deserve to have a life. With that, he was gone, melting back into the shadows as quietly as he had come. Harry and Hermione were left alone in the moonlit infirmary, the weight of impossible choices settling between them like a physical presence. He's right, you know, Hermione said after a long moment. About Dumbledore, about all of it. I know, Harry whispered. That's what scares me. Outside the windows, the first pale light of dawn was beginning to creep across the horizon. Tomorrow, today, really, would bring the farewell feast. Tomorrow would bring decisions that could change everything. Tomorrow would bring the choice between the life Harry had always known and the life he might dare to want. For the first time since the graveyard, Harry Potter allowed himself to hope. Chapter 2. Midnight Conspiracies. The library had never felt so vast in the pre-dawn darkness. Hermione moved between the towering shelves like a woman possessed, her arms already laden with volumes on international magical law, diplomatic protocols, and wizarding asylum procedures. Behind her, Harry and Viktor followed more slowly, both seeming somewhat stunned by the immediate intensity of her response to their impossible situation. Here, Hermione whispered, dropping her collection onto a table in the furthest corner of the library, where the shadows were deepest and the risk of discovery minimal. International Magical Law, a complete guide. Wizarding Diplomatic Relations since 1692. And she hefted a particularly thick volume. Cross-border Magical Citizenship and Sanctuary Rights. Viktor raised an eyebrow as he settled into one of the chairs. You carry such books with you at all times? Of course not, Hermione said, was already flipping open the first book with practiced efficiency. But I know where everything is in this library, and I know that if we're going to do this, if we're even going to consider doing this, we need to understand exactly what we're dealing with. Harry sank into a chair across from her, still looking dazed by the rapid turn of events. Hermione, you don't have to. Yes, I do. Her tone brooked no argument. Harry, this isn't just about you anymore. This is about what's right. And what's right is making sure you have all the information you need to make a truly informed choice. She found the section she was looking for and began reading aloud in a voice barely above a whisper. The International Confederation of Wizards recognizes the sovereign right of any member nation to grant sanctuary to individuals facing persecution based on magical ability, political circumstances, or threat to life and limb. She looked up. Bulgaria is a member nation. They have that right. What about the British ministry? Viktor asked. Would they try to, how do you say, extradite him? Hermione flipped several pages, her finger tracing the dense text. That would depend on several factors. Harry's age, for one. He's a minor, which complicates things legally. But, she paused, reading more carefully. But there are provisions for emergency sanctuary when the minor's life is demonstrably in danger from remaining in their country of origin. Demonstrably, Harry repeated. And I don't suppose having a Dark Lord specifically target you counts as demonstrable danger. Actually, Hermione said, a note of surprise in her voice, it does, especially given that you've already survived 2 direct encounters with him, and now that he's publicly returned. She looked between Harry and Viktor. The legal precedent is actually quite strong. Viktor leaned forward, his expression intent. What about the practical matters? The logistics? That's more complex. Hermione was already reaching for another book. A minor wizard can't just disappear, even with legal sanctuary. There would need to be formal applications, documentation, testimony. She trailed off, scanning the page before her. Unless what? Harry asked. Unless it's an emergency sanctuary claim. And if there's immediate and credible threat to life, Bulgarian authorities could grant temporary protection first and handle the paperwork later. She looked up at Viktor. How much influence does your family actually have? Viktor was quiet for a moment, and Harry could see him weighing his words carefully. My father sits on the Bulgarian Wizengamot, my mother's family. They have old connections, old favors owed. If I asked them to protect someone, he met Harry's gaze. They would not refuse me, especially not if that someone were Harry Potter. Your parents don't even know me, Harry said. Why would they risk international incident for a stranger? Because you are not a stranger to me, Viktor said simply, and because in Bulgaria we understand what it means to be hunted by those who would use you for their own purposes. We have our own history with dark witches and vitards. They know the value of sanctuary. Hermione had been quietly reading while they spoke, and now she looked up with an expression Harry had learned to recognize, the look she got when she was several steps ahead of everyone else in the room. There's another consideration, she said slowly. Viktor, when does the Durmstrang ship leave? Tomorrow evening, after the farewell feast. And when would the British ministry likely move to restrict Harry's movements, if they were going to? Viktor and Harry both stared at her. What do you mean? Harry asked. I mean that Dumbledore isn't going to just let you wander around freely, not after tonight, He's going to want to keep you somewhere he considers safe, under his control. The Dursleys, most likely. But this time with more supervision, more restrictions. Her brown eyes were bright with analytical fervor. If you're going to leave, it has to be before they can implement whatever protection plan they're developing. You think they're already planning? Harry felt the familiar weight of being manipulated settling over him like a shroud. Harry, you just witnessed Voldemort's return. You're the only person who can testify to what happened in that graveyard, besides Voldemort himself. Do you really think they're going to let you make your own decisions about where you go and what you do? The silence that followed was heavy with implication. Harry found himself thinking of all the times his choices had been made for him, all the times adults had decided what was best without bothering to consult him. The Dursleys, Dumbledore, not even his friends sometimes, though with better intentions. How long would I have to decide? He asked quietly. Not long, Viktor said. If Hermione is right about your ministry's intentions, perhaps only until tomorrow evening. Maybe less. And if I chose to go with you, what would that actually mean? What would my life look like? Viktor considered this carefully. My family's estate is in the mountains near Plovdiv. Old magic there, older than Hogwarts. You would be safe, truly safe, for the first time in your life, perhaps. You could continue your education, have excellent tutors, and the Bulgarian approach to magic is different from what you learn here. More emphasis on protection, on harmony with natural forces. What about my friends? The words came out smaller than Harry intended. What about them? Viktor asked gently. Do you think they would want you to stay here just to die for the cause they have chosen? Ron would never forgive me for leaving. Ron isn't the one with a target painted on his back, Hermione said, and there was steel in her voice that surprised both boys. Ron isn't the one who has to face Voldemort again and again, while everyone else makes plans about how best to use him. Harry looked at her sharply. You really think I should go? I think you should have the right to choose. Hermione reached across the table and took his hand, her fingers warm against his cold skin. For once in your life, Harry, you should get to decide what happens to you. Not Dumbledore, not the Ministry, not even Ron and me. You. But you said... Harry swallowed hard. Earlier, you said, where I go. You go. If you want me to come, Hermione said simply. If you want my help. But the choice has to be yours first. Viktor had been watching this exchange with careful attention, and now he spoke up. If Miss Granger were to come as well, it would actually strengthen the legal case. TVO British witches seeking sanctuary together, one of them the most famous witch of her generation. It would send a message about conditions in Britain that would be hard for anyone to ignore. Most famous witch of my generation? Hermione looked startled. That's hardly. Your academic achievements are well known, Viktor said seriously. Your loyalty to Harry Potter also. In Bulgaria, such things are valued. You would be welcomed. Harry felt something shift inside him, some tight knot of panic beginning to loosen. The idea of facing an uncertain future alone had been terrifying, but the thought of Hermione beside him, with her brilliant mind and unwavering support. What would we need to do? He heard himself ask. Practically, I mean, if we decided to go. Hermione was already flipping through her books again. Documentation would be helpful, but not strictly necessary for emergency sanctuary. Personal belongings, well, we couldn't take much without raising suspicion. We'd need to leave most things behind. I don't have much anyway, Harry said, thinking of his few possessions locked in his trunk upstairs. The most important thing, Viktor said, would be timing. We would need to leave during the farewell feast, when everyone is distracted. My shipmates would help. They understand loyalty, and they have no love for Death Eaters or Dark Witches. What about afterward? Harry asked. What happens when they realize we're gone? That, Hermione said grimly, is where things get complicated. There would be official protests, probably. demands for extradition. But if Viktor is right about his family's influence, they would protect you, Viktor said with quiet certainty. Both of you. No matter what pressure the British ministry brought to bear. Harry found himself studying Viktor's face in the dim candlelight. There was something in the older wizard's expression, not just determination, but something deeper, a kind of fierce protectiveness that Harry had rarely seen directed at him. "Why?" Harry asked suddenly. "Why are you willing to do this, or to risk so much for someone you barely know?" Viktor was quiet for a long moment, his dark eyes distant. When he finally spoke, his voice was soft but steady. "Because I have watched you for months now, Harry Potter. I have seen how they use you, how they put you in danger and call it necessary, how they treat you like a weapon instead of a person." He leaned forward, his gaze intense. "And because in Bulgaria, we believe that everyone deserves a chance to live their life on their own terms, even heroes." The word hung in the air between them. Hero. Harry had always hated that title, the weight of expectation it carried, the assumption that he would always be willing to sacrifice himself for others. "I'm not a hero," he said quietly. "Exactly," Viktor replied. "You are a boy who has been asked to carry burdens that grown witches and witards would struggle with. You deserve better." Hermione squeezed Harry's hand. "We both do," she said softly. "Harry, I've been thinking about this since the graveyard, since I saw what they put you through tonight. This isn't going to end. Voldemort is back, and they're going to expect you to be their weapon against him. Again and again. Until I die," Harry finished. "Yes." The word came out as barely a whisper, but it seemed to echo in the silence of the library. Harry felt the weight of the decision settling over him like a physical thing. Stay, and face whatever Dumbledore and the Ministry had planned for him. Stay, and watch his friends put themselves in danger trying to protect him. Stay, and eventually face Voldemort again, but probably alone and probably without any real choice in the matter. Or go. Leave everything familiar behind and trust in the protection of people he barely knew in a country he had never seen. "How long do we have to decide?" he asked. "The ship leaves at sunset tomorrow," Viktor said. "But if they are to avoid detection, we would need to leave during the feast. That gives us perhaps 18 hours. 18 hours to decide the rest of our lives," Harry said with a shaky laugh. 18 hours to choose freedom," Hermione corrected gently. Harry looked around the library, at the familiar shelves and dusty books that had been the backdrop to so many late-night study sessions, so many moments of discovery and friendship. Soon all of this might be nothing but memory. But then he thought of the graveyard, of Cedric's blank eyes staring up at the stars, of Voldemort's triumphant laugh as he proclaimed his return to power, of the long line of graves that stretched ahead if he stayed. 18 hours, he repeated, and for the first time since the third task, Harry Potter began to believe he might actually have a choice. "We'll need to be careful," Hermione said, already planning. "We can't let anyone suspect what we're considering. Not Ron, not anyone." "Agreed," Viktor said, "and we must decide soon. The longer we wait, the more likely it becomes that others will make the choice for us." Harry nodded, feeling the familiar sensation of events spinning beyond his control. But this time, perhaps, he could choose the direction of that spin. This time, perhaps, the choice would truly be his own. Chapter 3. The Weight of Truth. The sun had fully risen by the time Hermione's research took a darker turn. Harry had dozed fitfully in his chair, exhaustion finally overcoming anxiety, while Viktor maintained a quiet vigil by the library windows. It was Hermione's sharp intake of breath that woke them both. "Harry," she whispered, her voice tight with something between anger and horror. "You need to see this." Harry straightened, immediately alert. Hermione had moved beyond the international law texts to a section he'd never seen her explore before, the restricted area of Hogwarts historical records, accessible only to 7th years and with special permission. The book open before her was bound in cracked leather, its pages yellowed with age. "How did you get access to that?" Harry asked, noting the complex preservation charms shimmering around the ancient tome. "I've been researching Hogwarts history since 2nd year," Hermione said absently, her fingers tracing a particular passage. "After the Chamber of Secrets, I wanted to understand the school's past. I petitioned McGonagall for special access to historical records for my research projects." She looked up, her brown eyes bright with unshed tears. "I never thought to look for this specifically. But now—" "What did you find?" Viktor asked, moving closer to peer over her shoulder. "A pattern." Hermione's voice was steady, but Harry could hear the undercurrent of rage beneath her calm exterior. "Harry, do you know how many students have died at Hogwarts during Dumbledore's tenure as headmaster?" No. I mean, Myrtle. But she was decades before Dumbledore." 17, Hermione said flatly. 17 students have died in what the records classify as unfortunate accidents or heroic sacrifices during Dumbledore's 50-plus years as headmaster or deputy headmaster. Harry felt cold dread settling in his stomach. "That seems high." "It's unprecedented," Hermione continued, flipping to another marked page. "The previous headmaster, Armando Dippet, had 2 student deaths in nearly 40 years, both from dragonpox during an epidemic. The headmaster before him, Phineas Nigellus Black, had 1 death in 30 years, a Quidditch accident." Viktor had grown very still. 17 students in 50 years, he repeated slowly. That is not normal." "It's not normal anywhere," Hermione said bitterly. "I checked. Beauxbaton has had 3 student deaths in the past century. Durmstrang, even with its more dangerous curriculum, has had 5. Ilvermorny in America has had 2 since its founding." Harry's mouth felt dry. "What kind of accidents?" Hermione began reading from the record, her voice taking on the detached tone she used when she was trying not to cry. "Thomas Riddle, 1943, died of mysterious causes after investigating the Chamber of Secrets. Sarah Brightwater, 1956, fell to her death from the astronomy tower while researching defensive wards for a special project. Michael Clearwater, 1967, died during a training exercise in the Forbidden Forest." "Stop," Harry said quietly. "Please." But Hermione continued, relentless in her recitation. James Whitby, 1971, killed by a malfunctioning protective charm while helping to test new security measures. Catherine Bones, 1979, died during what's listed as a special mission for the Order of the Phoenix. "Bones," Viktor repeated. Like Susan Bones in Harry's year, yes. Her aunt." Hermione's hands were shaking now, "and Catherine Bones was 16 when she died, Harry. 16. The silence that followed was suffocating. Harry found himself thinking of Susan Bones, quiet and kind, always willing to help with herbology. What would she think if she knew her aunt had died as a teenager, apparently while working for Dumbledore's secret organization? "These can't all be—" Harry started, then stopped. He wanted to say they couldn't all be Dumbledore's fault, but the evidence was staring him in the face. "They're all listed with the same notation," Hermione said, her voice hollow. "All 17 of them. Death occurred while student was engaged in activities deemed necessary for the greater good of the wizarding world." Viktor's expression had grown thunderous. "The greater good," he repeated, and there was disgust in his accented voice. "This is what your headmaster calls sending children to die?" "It gets worse," Hermione whispered, turning to a more recent page. "Harry, look at the entries from your time here." Harry leaned forward reluctantly, dreading what he might see. The most recent entries were written in Dumbledore's familiar, flowing script. Harry Potter. First year. Survived encounter with Voldemort's spirit inhabiting Professor Quirrell. No student demonstrated remarkable resilience and magical ability when placed in life-threatening situation. Note: direct confrontation proved valuable in assessing the boy's capabilities and commitment to the cause. Harry Potter, second year. Successfully destroyed Tom Riddle's diary and basilisk in the Chamber of Secrets. Student showed willingness to sacrifice himself for others, confirming previous assessments. Note: student's connection to Voldemort continues to develop as expected. Harry Potter, third year. Demonstrated ability to repel large numbers of Dementors using advanced Patronus charm. Student showed increased independence and strategic thinking. Note: introduction of Sirius Black as emotional leverage, proving effective in motivating desired behaviors. Harry felt sick. Each entry read like a clinical assessment, not the records of a teacher concerned for his students' welfare. He's been evaluating me, like I'm some kind of experiment. Like you're a weapon he's been forging, Viktor said grimly. This is what I mean, Harry. In Bulgaria, if a headmaster put even one student at such risk, he would be removed from his position immediately. To deliberately place a child in danger, again and again. He trailed off, his jaw tight with anger. Hermione had found another section, her research apparently far from complete. There's more. Financial records, correspondence. She pulled out a thin folder that had been tucked between the pages. Harry, did you know that Dumbledore controls your parents' vault at Gringotts? What? Harry felt the world tilt around him. No, that's not. I have access to my vault. To a trust vault set up for your school expenses, Hermione corrected, scanning the documents. But the main Potter inheritance, including your parents' house, their possessions, James Potter's family estate, all of that has been under Dumbledore's control since your parents' deaths, as your magical guardian. Magical guardian? Viktor looked confused. But you live with Muggle relatives, yes? The Dursleys are my legal guardians in the Muggle world, Harry said slowly, pieces of a horrible puzzle clicking into place. But in the magical world, Dumbledore has had complete legal authority over you since you were 15 months old, Hermione finished. Your living situation, your education, your finances, your medical care, all of it has been his decision. Harry stood up abruptly, the chair scraping loudly against the floor. I need air, he said, his voice strained. Harry! Hermione started to rise, but he waved her off. Just give me a minute, please. He walked to the nearest window, pressing his palms against the cool glass. Outside, the grounds of Hogwarts looked peaceful in the morning sunlight. Students were beginning to emerge from the castle, heading to breakfast, or simply enjoying the warm June weather. It looked so normal, so safe. But it wasn't, was it? It never had been. 17 students, he said quietly, not turning around. 17 children who died because Dumbledore decided their lives were worth sacrificing for his greater good. Harry, Viktor said gently, you do not have to be the 18th. The words hit Harry like a physical blow. The 18th. But is that what he was destined to become? Another entry in Dumbledore's records, another student who died in service to a cause he'd never truly chosen to fight? In Bulgaria, Viktor continued, they have a saying, the eagle who sends the young hawks to die is no protector of the nest. Your Dumbledore, he is no protector. He is someone who uses children as soldiers. But the war, Harry said weakly. Voldemort has to be stopped. Yes, Viktor agreed, but not by you. Not by a boy who has already given more than any child should be asked to give. Harry turned back to face them, and he could see his own desperation reflected in their concerned expressions. What would happen to everyone else if I left? To Ron? To Ginny? To all the other students who might become targets? They would be in no more danger than they are now, Hermione said firmly. Harry, you being here doesn't make anyone safer. If anything, your presence puts everyone around you at greater risk. Voldemort will come after you wherever you are. But if you are here, surrounded by innocent people—" She didn't need to finish the thought. Harry had seen what happened when Voldemort targeted him directly. Cedric was dead because he'd been standing too close when the trap was sprung. "There's something else," Hermione said quietly, pulling out one more document. "Communications between Dumbledore and the Ministry. They're planning your summer, Harry. They want to place you back with the Dursleys, but under constant surveillance this time. Aura rotations, monitoring charms, or complete restriction of your movements." "Like a prison," Harry said. "Like bait," Viktor corrected darkly. "They want Voldemort to come after you there, yes? Where they can control the battlefield?" Harry felt the last of his resistance crumble. "They're going to use me as bait. Again." "And when that fails," Hermione said, her voice barely audible, "when people die protecting you or trying to use you as a weapon, you'll be the one who carries the guilt, just like you're carrying guilt over Cedric now." It was true. Harry could feel that guilt eating at him, the certainty that Cedric would still be alive if Harry had never existed, if Harry had never become the boy who lived. "In Bulgaria," Viktor said into the silence, "heroes are honored. Yes. But they are also protected. We do not send our children to fight our wars, no matter how just the cause." "What would I be there?" Harry asked. "What kind of life could I have?" "A normal one," Viktor said simply. "You could study magic because you love it, not because someone might die if you fail your exams. You could make friends without worrying that knowing you will get them killed. You could choose your own path." Through the window, Harry caught sight of something that made his blood run cold. Dumbledore was crossing the grounds below, accompanied by several witches and wizards in the dark robes of Ministry officials. They were heading toward the castle, their expressions grim and purposeful. "They're coming," Harry said quietly. Hermione and Viktor joined him at the window, watching the group of adults who were undoubtedly planning Harry's immediate future without any input from Harry himself. "How long before they come looking for me?" Harry asked. "Not long," Hermione said. "They'll want to discuss your summer arrangements, probably get your testimony about what happened in the graveyard while it's still fresh. And then? And then you become their property again," Viktor said bluntly, "until the next time they need you to face death for them." Harry watched Dumbledore disappear into the castle, surrounded by his Ministry escorts. The old headmaster looked tired, weighted down by responsibility and difficult choices, but Harry found he could no longer summon sympathy for that burden. Not when it was built on the graves of 17 students. Not when Harry was apparently meant to be the 18th. "Viktor," he said suddenly, his voice steady for the first time since they'd entered the library. "Your offer. Does it still stand?" "Of course. And you're certain your family would protect us? Both of us?" "I give you my word," Viktor said solemnly, "on my magic and my family's honor." Harry looked at Hermione, seeing his own determination reflected in her eyes. "We'll need a plan. A real plan. Not just the idea of leaving." "Already working on it," Hermione said, and Harry could see the strategic mind that had gotten them through 4 years of increasingly dangerous situations kicking into high gear. "But we'll need to move quickly. If Dumbledore is meeting with Ministry officials now, they'll want to control every aspect of my life going forward," Harry finished. "Like they always have." "Not if we give them no chance," Viktor said firmly. "The Durmstrang ship can be ready to leave early if necessary. My captain, he understands the importance of helping those who seek sanctuary." Harry took one last look out the window at the Hogwarts grounds, at the place that had been the closest thing to home he'd ever known. It was beautiful in the morning light, peaceful and welcoming. But it was also the place where 17 children had died, serving Dumbledore's greater good. And Harry Potter was done being a sacrifice on that altar. "Let's do it," he said quietly. "Let's get out of here while we still can." For the first time in his life, Harry Potter was going to choose his own destiny, and that destiny lay far from the manipulations of Albus Dumbledore and the expectations of a wizarding world that saw him as a weapon rather than a boy. It lay in Bulgaria, with people who promised to protect him rather than use him. It lay in freedom. Chapter 4. Gathering Allies. The abandoned classroom on the 3rd floor felt like a war room as the trio spread their plans across several desks. Maps, documents, and hastily scrawled notes covered every surface, creating a tactical display that would have impressed even Mad-Eye Moody, the real one. Harry found himself marveling at how quickly their desperate midnight conversation had transformed into something that looked almost possible. "We need help," Hermione said, without preamble, her quill scratching across a piece of parchment as she made notes. "There are too many variables, too many things that could go wrong. We can't do this alone." Viktor nodded from his position by the door, where he'd been keeping watch for any approaching footsteps. "I have been thinking the same thing. My roommate, Dmitri Volkov, he is, well, how do you say, trustworthy. We have known each other since childhood. His family owes mine several debts of honor." "How much would you have to tell him?" Harry asked, trying to ignore the way his stomach clenched at the thought of more people knowing their secret. "Everything," Viktor said honestly. "But Dmitri, he would rather die than betray a friend. And he has no love for Death Eaters. His older brother Vas killed by them 3 years ago during a raid near the Romanian border." Hermione looked up from her planning. "Can he help with the logistics? We'll need someone on the ship to ensure Harry and I can board without being seen by Karkaroff or drawing attention from other students." "Yes, Dmitri is, what is the word, resourceful. If anyone can get you onto the ship undetected, or it is him." Harry watched the two of them planning his escape with an efficiency that was both reassuring and terrifying. What about magical help? If we're going to disappear completely, we'll need more than just human allies. Hermione's face brightened. "Actually, I have an idea about that. Harry, you've helped house elves before, haven't you? Specifically, Dobby," Harry said, understanding immediately. "You think he'd help us?" "I think he'd do anything to protect you," Hermione said firmly. "And house elf magic can bypass most conventional wards. If anyone can help us leave Hogwarts undetected, it's him." The idea made sense, but Harry felt a familiar pang of guilt at the thought of asking Dobby to risk himself. "I can't ask him to— Harry Potter must not be putting himself in danger again." All three of them spun toward the voice, wands appearing in their hands with practiced speed. But the familiar figure that materialized near the classroom's fireplace made Harry lower his wand with a mixture of relief and exasperation. "Dobby," he said. "How did you know we were here?" The house elf's large green eyes were bright with worry as he wrung his pillowcase-like garment between his hands. "Dobby has been watching Harry Potter, sir. Dobby saw Harry Potter leave the hospital wing with the famous Hermione Granger and the Quidditch champion, and Dobby was worried. Harry Potter has been in terrible danger, and now Harry Potter is planning something that feels like more danger." Viktor raised an eyebrow. "He can sense what we are planning." "House elves are very sensitive to emotional magic," Hermione explained quietly. "Dobby, we're not planning to put Harry in danger. We're planning to get him out of danger." Dobby's ears perked up with interest. "Out of danger, miss. But Harry Potter is safe at Hogwarts. The great Albus Dumbledore protects Harry Potter." The silence that followed was heavy with implication. Harry found himself studying Dobby's earnest expression, seeing the house elf's complete faith in the system that had already failed Harry so many times. "Dobby," Harry said gently, "what if I told you that staying at Hogwarts might mean I won't survive to see my 17th birthday?" The change in Dobby's demeanor was immediate and dramatic. His large eyes went wide with horror, and his ears drooped as if they were suddenly too heavy for his head. Harry Potter! Harry Potter cannot mean such a thing. 17 students have died at this school while serving Dumbledore's greater good, Hermione said quietly. 17 children who were asked to sacrifice themselves for a war they didn't choose to fight. Dobby's eyes grew even wider, if that were possible. No, that cannot be true. The great Dumbledore would never put a 12-year-old boy in mortal danger to test his courage, Harry asked. Would never allow a student to face a basilisk alone? Would never enter that same student in a deadly tournament against his will? Each question hit Dobby like a physical blow. The house elf began to shake, his hands clutching at his pillowcase garment. But Harry Potter has been doing these things, Dobby whispered. Harry Potter has been facing such dangers. Every year, Victor said grimly. Every year since he arrived at this school, Harry Potter has been placed in life-threatening situations. And every year, the adults around him have called it necessary. Dobby was crying now, large tears rolling down his cheeks. Dobby should have known. Dobby should have been protecting Harry Potter better. You couldn't have known, Harry said, kneeling down to Dobby's level. But you can help now. We're planning to leave Britain entirely, to go somewhere safe. But we need help getting away without being caught. Where would Harry Potter go? Dobby asked through his tears. Bulgaria, Victor answered. My family will protect him there. He will be safe, truly safe, all for the first time in his life. Dobby looked between the three of them, his expression cycling through disbelief, hope, and finally, fierce determination. Dobby will help, he declared. Dobby will help Harry Potter escape from those who would use him as a weapon. The relief Harry felt was almost overwhelming. Thank you, Dobby. But I need you to understand. This is dangerous for you too. If they find out you helped us. Dobby does not care, the house elf said fiercely. Dobby has been waiting for someone to truly protect Harry Potter, not just use him for their own purposes. If Master Victor's family will keep Harry Potter safe, then Dobby will help make that happen. Hermione leaned forward, already switching into planning mode. What exactly can you do to help us? Oh, Dobby? House elf magic is different from wizard magic, Dobby explained, puffing up with pride. Dobby can help Harry Potter and Hermione Granger leave the castle without anyone noticing. Dobby can make it so the magical signatures are confused, so the tracking spells think Harry Potter is still in his dormitory. For how long? Victor asked. Several hours at least. Maybe longer if Dobby is very clever about it. That would give us enough time to reach the ship and get away, Hermione said, making notes furiously. Dobby, can you also help with misdirection? Make it appear that Harry is in places he's not? Oh yes, miss. Dobby is very good at such magic. Dobby has had much practice hiding from bad wizards who wanted to hurt house elves. Harry felt a stab of sympathy for the little elf, but Victor's voice brought him back to the immediate concerns. I should speak with Dimitri soon, Victor said. The longer we wait, the more likely it becomes that someone will notice our planning. Go, Hermione said, but be careful what you say until you're certain of his loyalty. Victor nodded and moved toward the door. I will return within the hour. We should finalize our timing then. After Victor left, Harry found himself alone with Hermione and Dobby, the weight of their decision settling over him like a heavy cloak. Hermione, he said quietly, are you sure about this? Once we leave, there's no going back. You'll be giving up everything. Your parents, your future in Britain, your whole life. My parents will understand eventually, Hermione said, though Harry could hear the uncertainty beneath her confident words. Oh, and as for my future, Harry, what kind of future do any of us have if Voldemort wins? What kind of world will we be living in? But what if we're wrong? What if there was another way? Hermione set down her quill and looked at him directly. Harry, in 3 years at this school, how many times has anyone asked you what you wanted? How many times has someone given you a real choice about the dangers you face? Harry thought about it and realized the answer was devastating in its simplicity. Never. Exactly. Viktor is the first person to offer you a real alternative, a real choice about your own life. That alone tells me we're making the right decision. Dobby nodded emphatically. The famous Hermione Granger is very wise. Harry Potter deserves to choose his own path. There's something else, Hermione continued, her voice dropping to barely above a whisper. I've been thinking about what Viktor said, about never being able to return to Britain. Harry, I don't think you were ever going to survive this war if you stayed. What do you mean? I mean that Dumbledore has been preparing you to die heroically since the day you set foot in this castle. Every trial, every dangerous situation he's allowed you to face. It's all been building toward the moment when he'll ask you to make the ultimate sacrifice for his greater good. The words hit Harry like a physical blow, partly because he recognized their truth. He thought of Dumbledore's knowing looks, his gentle encouragements to be brave, his way of appearing just a moment too late to prevent danger, but just in time to witness Harry's courage. He's been grooming me, Harry said, or the realization settling over him like ice water. Not for greatness, Hermione said sadly, for martyrdom. They sat in silence for several minutes, processing the full implications of what they were planning to do. Finally, Dobby spoke up in a small voice. Harry Potter will be happy in Bulgaria. I hope so, Harry said honestly. I hope I'll finally have a chance to find out who I am when I'm not being someone's weapon or someone's symbol. Dobby hopes Harry Potter will be happy too, the house elf said solemnly. Harry Potter deserves happiness. When Viktor returned an hour later, his expression was both relieved and grim. Dimitri will help, he announced, but the situation is more urgent than I thought. What do you mean? Hermione asked, immediately alert. Karkaroff has been in communication with the Bulgarian ministry this morning. He is trying to arrange for immediate departure. Tonight, instead of tomorrow evening. Harry felt his heart skip. Why? What's changed? He is more frightened than I realized. He knows that Voldemort will come for him soon, and he wants to be as far from Britain as possible when that happens. So the ship leaves tonight? Hermione asked. Yes, immediately after the farewell feast ends, which means we have perhaps 4 hours to finalize everything. The room fell silent as they absorbed this news. 4 hours to execute a plan that would change their lives forever. Can we be ready? Harry asked. We have to be, Hermione said firmly. Dobby, or can you make the arrangements on such short notice? Dobby can do anything to protect Harry Potter, the house elf declared. Dobby will make sure Harry Potter and Hermione Granger can leave safely. And I will ensure that you can board the ship without detection, Viktor added. Dimitri has already agreed to create a distraction during the loading process. Harry looked around at his unlikely allies, a brilliant witch who was risking everything for friendship, a foreign champion who barely knew him but was willing to defy international law for his protection, and a house elf whose loyalty ran deeper than any magic. For the first time since the third task, Harry Potter felt something other than despair. He felt hope. All right, he said, his voice steady with newfound determination. Let's do this. Let's get me out of here. As they began finalizing the details of their escape plan, Harry caught himself thinking about what awaited him in Bulgaria. A chance at a normal life, an education without mortal peril, friends who chose to know him rather than being assigned to protect him. A future where Harry Potter, the person, mattered more than Harry Potter, the symbol. It was worth any risk to make that future possible. The point of no return was rapidly approaching, and for the first time in his life, Harry Potter was running toward it rather than being dragged. Chapter 5. The Farewell Feast Gambit. The great hall had never felt so heavy with unspoken grief. Black banners hung from the enchanted ceiling in memory of Cedric Diggory, their dark fabric stirring gently in a breeze that existed only in magic. The students from all three schools sat at their respective tables, the usual excitement of the farewell feast replaced by something more subdued, more fragile. Harry sat beside Ron at the Gryffindor table, his stomach churning with more than pre-escape nerves. Every word he spoke to his best friend felt like a lie by omission. Every shared glance, a betrayal in waiting. Ron was talking quietly about summer plans, about Quidditch, and maybe visiting Harry at the Dursleys, completely unaware that the friend beside him was planning to disappear forever within the hour. "You're quiet tonight," Ron observed, cutting through Harry's spiral of guilty thoughts. "More than usual, I mean. You all right?" Harry forced a smile, though it felt like his face might crack from the effort. "Just tired. It's a lot." Ron's expression softened with understanding. "Yeah, I know. Cedric and all that. The whole tournament, really." He paused, studying Harry's face. "You know you can talk to me about it, right? About what happened out there?" The genuine concern in Ron's voice made Harry's chest tighten painfully. This was what he was leaving behind. This friendship that had sustained him through 4 years of magical education and mortal peril. Ron had stood by him through everything, even when he doubted Harry during the tournament selection. And now Harry was about to repay that loyalty with disappearance and silence. "I know," Harry said quietly. Maybe after we get some distance from it all. This summer, when things calm down." It wasn't technically a lie, Harry told himself. There would be distance, more than Ron could imagine. Oh, and maybe someday, when the war was over and Voldemort was defeated by someone else, Harry could find a way to explain why he'd had to leave. Someday. Across the hall, Viktor caught Harry's eye briefly before returning his attention to his Durmstrang tablemates. To anyone watching, Viktor looked like any other visiting champion preparing to bid farewell to Hogwarts, but Harry could see the tension in his shoulders, the way his dark eyes kept flicking to the head table where Dumbledore sat, speaking quietly with Karkaroff. Karkaroff, who looked like a man awaiting execution. The former Death Eater had barely touched his food, and his eyes darted constantly toward the Great Hall's entrances, as if expecting masked figures to burst through at any moment. "Look at him," Ron muttered, following Harry's gaze. "Jumpy as a long-tailed cat in a room full of rocking chairs. You'd think he had something to feel guilty about." Harry nearly choked on his pumpkin juice. If only Ron knew how close to the truth that observation was. Further down the Gryffindor table, Hermione was engaged in animated conversation with some of the younger students, appearing for all the world like a conscientious prefect-to-be, offering comfort and reassurance. But Harry could see the careful way she was positioning herself, the subtle glances she sent toward the staff table, the way her hand kept drifting to her robes where Harry knew she'd hidden her wand for easy access. Every few minutes, her eyes would meet his across the table, and she'd give him the tiniest nod. The diversions were in place. The portraits along the corridors leading to Gryffindor Tower had been subtly confounded to report seeing Harry heading upstairs to his dormitory, should anyone ask. False magical signatures were already being laid throughout the castle, creating a trail that would suggest Harry had retired early, overcome by grief and exhaustion. It was brilliant, really, and it made Harry feel sick with deception. Students of Hogwarts, Beauxbatons, and Durmstrang. Dumbledore's voice carried clearly through the great hall as he rose from his seat at the head table. The gentle murmur of conversation died away, leaving only the soft whisper of the black banners stirring overhead. "Before our friends from abroad depart, I would like to say a few words." The headmaster's blue eyes swept the room, pausing briefly on Harry. And behind those half-moon spectacles was the same gentle warmth Harry had always known, the same grandfatherly kindness that had once made him feel safe and protected. Now it made his skin crawl. "This year's Triwizard tournament has ended in tragedy," Dumbledore continued, his voice heavy with sorrow. "We have lost a bright light in Cedric Diggory, a young man who embodied the very best of what we hope to achieve in our students. He was loyal, brave, and kind. His loss reminds us that there are forces in this world that would destroy such light, given the chance. Harry's hands clenched in his lap, forces like Voldemort, who had murdered Cedric simply because the boy had been standing too close to Harry when the trap was sprung. Another casualty in a war Harry had never chosen to fight. Another name on the list of people who had died because of their proximity to the boy who lived. But we must not let grief blind us to our purpose, Dumbledore's speech continued. We must not allow fear to make us forget our duty to one another, to the greater good that binds us all together. In the dark times ahead, and make no mistake, dark times are coming, we will need to stand united. We will need to be willing to make sacrifices for the sake of those who cannot protect themselves. The word settled over the great hall like a blanket of moral obligation. Students nodded solemnly, clearly moved by their headmaster's call to courage and selflessness. But Harry heard something different in the speech, a justification for all the sacrifices to come, to all the young lives that would be spent in service to Dumbledore's vision of the greater good. 17 students had already died for that greater good. How many more would follow? Some among us will be called to bear greater burdens than others, Dumbledore said, and his eyes found Harry again across the crowded hall. Some will face trials that would break lesser spirits, but I have faith that those who are called will answer, just as they always have, just as they must. The weight of expectation in those words was suffocating. Harry felt every eye in the great hall turn toward him, felt the familiar mantle of the boy who lived settle around his shoulders like a shroud. They all knew what Dumbledore was saying. They all understood who would be expected to make the ultimate sacrifice when the time came. Not anymore. Harry caught Victor's eye and gave the smallest possible nod. It was time. Excellence in magic requires dedication, Dumbledore was saying, his voice taking on the rhythmic cadence that Harry had heard so many times before. It requires the willingness to put others before ourselves, to... Victor chose that moment to stand, his chair scraping loudly against the stone floor. Every head in the great hall turned toward the Durmstrang table, where the Bulgarian champion was raising a goblet of pumpkin juice toward the head table. "A toast," Victor announced, his accented voice carrying clearly through the sudden silence. "To Cedric Diggory, who showed us all what true courage looks like, and to friendship that transcends borders and languages." It was a perfect interruption, respectful, heartfelt, and completely in character for a foreign champion, bidding farewell. The great hall erupted in movement as students throughout the room rose to their feet, raising their own goblets in honor of the fallen champion. In the controlled chaos of the toast, Harry slipped away from the Gryffindor table. It was easier than he'd expected. Ron was focused on the ceremony, his eyes bright with unshed tears as he raised his goblet toward the Hufflepuff table where Cedric's housemates sat. The other Gryffindors were similarly engaged, and even the staff at the head table were participating in the impromptu memorial. Harry moved quickly but carefully through the shadows along the wall, keeping to the periphery of the great hall where the light was dimmest. His heart was hammering so hard he was certain everyone could hear it, but no one looked his way. Hermione's diversions were working perfectly. Several portraits along his intended route would swear they'd seen him heading up the marble staircase toward Gryffindor Tower, should anyone ask. The side entrance to the great hall was unguarded, the usual prefects and staff too caught up in the farewell ceremony to notice one student's quiet departure. Harry slipped through the doorway and into the corridor beyond, where Dobby was waiting in the shadows. "Harry Potter is ready," the house elf whispered, his large eyes bright with nervous excitement. "Ready as I'll ever be," Harry replied, though his voice shook slightly. "Dobby has prepared everything, just as Harry Potter requested. The magical signatures, the false trails, the confusion charms on the portraits, all is ready. But we must be quick. The window of opportunity is small." They moved swiftly through the castle's corridors, Dobby's magic smoothing their way past detection wards and monitoring charms. Behind them, Harry could still hear the distant sound of the toast continuing, Viktor's voice leading the great hall in a moving tribute to fallen friends, and the bonds that connected them all. Even as they fled, Viktor was protecting them with his words, giving them the cover they needed to escape. The predetermined meeting point was a disused classroom on the ground floor, its windows facing the lake where the Durmstrang ship waited in the darkness. Hermione was already there when they arrived, her bushy hair tied back severely, and her face pale, but determined. "Everything's in place," she reported quietly. "The diversions are holding, and I've set up delayed action charms that will trigger over the next few hours. Anyone looking for you will find evidence that you went to your dormitory, then perhaps for a walk by the lake to clear your head, then maybe to the library for some late-night research. By the time they realize something's wrong, we'll be long gone." "Brilliant," Harry said, and meant it. "What about—" Viktor appeared in the doorway, slightly out of breath, but grinning with what looked like genuine excitement. "The toast vare's a success," he announced. "Everyone is talking about Cedric and friendship and courage. No one noticed you leaving." "What about Dimitri?" Hermione asked. "Already on the ship, preparing our escape route. He will create a distraction among the crew vial aboard. After that—" Viktor's expression grew serious. "After that, Eva will be committed. Once the ship leaves British waters, there will be no turning back." Harry looked around at his unlikely allies, a brilliant witch risking everything for loyalty, a foreign champion who barely knew him but was willing to defy international law for his protection, and a house elf whose devotion ran deeper than any oath. "Are we all sure about this?" he asked. "Last chance to change our minds." "Harry Potter deserves to be safe," Dobby declared fiercely. "Dobby will not let anyone hurt Harry Potter anymore." "I've never been more certain of anything in my life," Hermione said firmly. "This is right, Harry. This is what needs to happen." "And I gave you my vord," Viktor added simply. "That has not changed." Harry nodded, feeling something tight in his chest finally loosen. "Then let's go." The journey from the castle to the lake passed in a blur of careful movement and whispered instructions. Dobby's magic cloaked them from detection, while Hermione's prepared diversions continued to weave a false trail of Harry's supposed whereabouts. They moved through the grounds like ghosts, invisible and silent under the cover of the moonless night. The Durmstrang ship loomed before them like a dark castle on the water, its black sails stirring gently in the lake breeze. Lights flickered in its windows, and they could hear the distant sounds of the crew preparing for departure. "There," Viktor pointed to a small dock that extended into the lake near the ship's stern. "Dimitri will be waiting with a boat." Sure enough, a slim figure was standing on the dock, barely visible in the darkness. As they approached, Harry could make out more details, a young man about Viktor's age with sandy hair and nervous eyes that kept darting between the ship and the shore. "Viktor," Dimitri called softly. "You are late. I was beginning to worry." "We are here now," Viktor replied, clasping his friend's shoulder. "This is Harry Potter and Hermione Granger." Dimitri's eyes widened as he looked at Harry. "The Harry Potter? Truly?" "Just Harry," Harry said, uncomfortable with the awe in the other boy's voice. "Of course. Forgive me." Dimitri shook his head, refocusing on the task at hand. "The boat is ready, and I have created confusion among the crew. But they must hurry. Karkaroff wants to depart as soon as possible." The small boat that would carry them to the ship bobbed gently against the dock. It looked impossibly fragile for such a momentous journey, but Harry supposed that was fitting. His entire life was about to change because of choices made in desperation and hope. "Harry Potter," Dobby said softly, tugging at Harry's robes. "Before you go, Dobby wants Harry Potter to know that Dobby is proud. Proud that Harry Potter chose to save himself instead of letting others use him as a weapon." The words hit Harry harder than he'd expected. "Thank you, Dobby, for everything." I couldn't have done this without you." "Harry Potter is brave and good," Dobby replied, his eyes bright with tears. "Harry Potter deserves happiness and safety. Dobby hopes Harry Potter finds both in his new home." With that, the house elf stepped back and snapped his fingers. A warm, tingling sensation washed over Harry and Hermione, and Harry knew that Dobby was setting the final pieces of their deception in place, magical signatures that would suggest they had returned to their dormitories, tired from the emotional evening and ready for sleep. It would buy them hours before anyone realized they were gone. Harry took one last look at Hogwarts Castle, its windows glowing warmly in the darkness. Somewhere inside, Ron was probably wondering where Harry had gone, maybe starting to worry. Somewhere inside, Dumbledore was continuing his speech about sacrifice and duty and the greater good, and somewhere inside, portraits were faithfully reporting that Harry Potter had gone to bed early, overcome by grief and exhaustion. "Ready?" Viktor asked gently. Harry climbed into the boat, followed by Hermione. As they pulled away from the dock, he could see Dobby still standing on the shore, a small figure waving goodbye to the boy he had helped to save. The Durmstrang ship grew larger as they approached, its black hull rising from the dark water like a fortress of hope and possibility. Dimitri had indeed created confusion among the crew. Harry could hear raised voices and what sounded like an argument about missing supplies that was drawing attention away from their boarding point. As they climbed aboard the ship, Harry felt the weight of his old life falling away. Behind them, Hogwarts was shrinking into the distance, becoming just another castle on a hill instead of the center of his world. Ahead lay Bulgaria and Viktor's family, and the chance at a life where Harry Potter could be more than just a symbol or a weapon. For the first time since the third task, Harry Potter smiled. He was free. Chapter 6. Journey to Freedom. The Durmstrang ship cut through the dark waters with unnatural silence, its enchanted hull leaving barely a wake as it carried them away from everything Harry had ever known. He stood at the stern rail, watching the lights of Hogwarts Castle fade into the distance until they were nothing more than a dim glow on the horizon, then nothing at all. "Second thoughts?" Viktor asked quietly, joining him at the rail. Harry considered the question seriously. "No," he said finally. "Regrets, maybe. But not second thoughts." "Good, because in about 2 hours, we will reach the first transfer point. And after that," Viktor shrugged, "after that, there really will be no turning back." The ship was moving faster than seemed possible, its magical propulsion carrying them across the North Sea toward the continent beyond. Harry had never left Britain before. Even the Quidditch World Cup had been held in Devon, and the thought of crossing into truly foreign magical territory was both exhilarating and terrifying. "Transfer point?" Hermione asked, emerging from below deck where she had been establishing their temporary quarters in the ship's guest cabin. "I thought we were going directly to Bulgaria." "Too dangerous," Viktor explained. "A direct route from Britain to Bulgaria would be too obvious, too easy to track. Instead, ever make several stops. Germany first, then Austria, and finally into Bulgaria through the back routes my family has used for generations." "Like a magical underground railroad," Harry murmured. "Something like that, yes. My people have long experience helping those who need to disappear from unfriendly authorities." Hermione pulled out a small notebook and began making notes. "What kind of documentation will we need? Papers, identification, travel permits?" "For you and Harry, none at first. You are under my family's protection now, which carries significant weight in most of magical Europe. But eventually, if you choose to stay permanently..." Viktor glanced at Harry. "There would be formal asylum applications, testimony before the Bulgarian Wizengamot, that sort of thing. Nothing that cannot be handled when the time comes." The casual way Viktor spoke of permanent asylum made the reality of their situation hit Harry anew. This wasn't just running away from a bad summer with the Dursleys. This was potentially leaving Britain forever. They're becoming citizens of a country he had never seen, building new lives from nothing. "Are you frightened?" Hermione asked, studying his expression. "Terrified," Harry admitted. "But also, excited? Is that wrong?" "It would be wrong not to be excited," Viktor said firmly. "You are about to discover that the Vault is much larger and more wonderful than you have been taught to believe." As if summoned by his words, lights began to appear ahead of them, not the warm yellow glow of British magical settlements, but something cooler and bluer, like captured starlight reflected in water. "Our first stop," Viktor announced, "the port of Cuxhaven on the German coast. From here we take a portkey to Vienna, then another to Plovdiv." The German magical port was unlike anything Harry had ever imagined. Where Diagon Alley was cramped and twisted, ancient buildings leaning against each other like tired old friends, Cuxhaven spread out in elegant curves around a natural harbour. The architecture was all clean lines and graceful arches, with subtle illumination charms that made the entire settlement glow softly in the pre-dawn darkness. "It's beautiful," Hermione breathed, leaning over the ship's rail to get a better view. "Wait until you see Durmstrang," Viktor said with obvious pride. "Or the mountain cities of Bulgaria. This is just a transfer port, functional, but not our finest work." The ship docked at a pier that extended into the harbour like a graceful arm. Other vessels were moored nearby, some recognizable as European magical ships, others so foreign in design that Harry couldn't even guess their origins. The diversity was overwhelming after a lifetime of seeing only British magical transportation. "Papers, please." The German customs official was a thin witch with steel-grey hair, pulled back in a severe bun. She examined Viktor's diplomatic documents with careful attention before turning to Harry and Hermione. "And these two?" "Under my family's protection," Viktor said smoothly, producing a scroll sealed with what Harry assumed was the Krum family crest. "Travelling under emergency sanctuary provisions." The witch's eyebrows rose slightly as she examined the seal. "Sanctuary seekers from Britain?" "This is unusual." "These are unusual times," Viktor replied diplomatically. Harry held his breath as the customs official studied first his face, then Hermione's. He was acutely aware that his appearance was distinctive: the messy hair, the lightning bolt scar, the green eyes that marked him as unmistakably Harry Potter. If she recognized him. "Political refugees?" the witch asked. "Something like that," Viktor said carefully. After what felt like an eternity, the customs official nodded and waved them through. But as they walked away from the checkpoint, Harry caught sight of her making notes in a ledger, and his stomach tightened with worry. "She recognized me," he said quietly. "Perhaps," Viktor agreed. "But German magical law is very strict about political sanctuary. Even if she reports our passage to the British ministry, she cannot legally detain us without evidence of actual crimes." "What if they claim there are crimes?" Hermione asked, ever the practical strategist. "Well, then we make sure we are long gone before any extradition requests can be processed." The portkey station in Cuxhaven was bustling with early morning travellers despite the hour. Harry marvelled at the casual international nature of it all. Wizards and witches from across Europe mixing together, as if crossing borders was the most natural thing in the world. A far cry from the insular British magical community, where most wizards seemed to view anything foreign with suspicion. Their portkey to Vienna was an ornate brass compass that activated at precisely 4:30 in the morning. The familiar sensation of being jerked forward by an invisible hook seized Harry's navel, and the world dissolved into a whirlwind of colour and motion. They materialized in what appeared to be an underground chamber, carved from white stone, with arched ceilings that reminded Harry of photographs he'd seen of European cathedrals. The Vienna portkey terminal was even grander than Cuxhaven, with moving staircases and floating information displays providing directions in at least a dozen languages. "Impressive, isn't it?" Viktor noted, watching Harry's wide-eyed examination of their surroundings. The Austrian magical community has always believed in doing things properly. But their arrival in Vienna brought complications. As they approached the customs checkpoint for their connecting portkey to Bulgaria, Harry spotted familiar dark robes among the crowd. British auras, Hermione whispered, her voice tight with alarm. Sure enough, 2 wizards in the distinctive robes of Britain's magical law enforcement were stationed near the checkpoint, was examining papers and speaking quietly with Austrian officials. Harry's blood ran cold as he realized they were checking every traveller, paying particular attention to anyone who looked young or British. This way, Viktor said calmly, steering them toward a different section of the terminal. There are always alternative routes for those who know where to look. He led them through a series of corridors that seemed designed to confuse casual observers, past shops and offices that catered to the international magical community. Finally, they arrived at a small, discreet office marked only with a brass plaque reading, "Private Transportation Services." The wizard behind the desk looked up as they entered, his eyes immediately focusing on Viktor with obvious recognition and respect. "Master Krum," the man said in accented English, rising from his chair, "how may we be of service?" "My friends require discreet passage to Bulgaria," Viktor said simply. "Through the usual channels." The wizard's gaze shifted to Harry and Hermione, taking in their travel-worn appearance and obvious tension. "There will be additional fees for discretion and questions asked later." Viktor produced a small leather pouch that clinked heavily with what Harry assumed were gold galleons. "No questions asked, and no records kept. Can this be arranged?" "Of course. The next private portkey to Plovdiv leaves in 20 minutes. As they waited in the officer's comfortable sitting area, Hermione leaned close to Viktor. "How did you know about this place? About these routes?" Viktor's expression grew serious. "My family has been involved in, let us say, or helping people travel discreetly, for many generations, during the wars with Grindelwald, and before that, during other times when people needed to disappear from hostile governments. We learned that official channels are not always the safest channels." "Your family helped refugees," Hermione said, and it wasn't a question. "Among other things, yes. It is part of why I was so certain they would help Harry. Protecting those who seek sanctuary is, how do you say, in our blood." Harry felt a warmth spread through his chest that had nothing to do with the office's heating charms. These people, Viktor's family, had a history of protecting people like him, people who needed to disappear, to start over, to find safety from those who would use them. The private portkey to Bulgaria was a small silver pendant carved with what looked like a mountain range. As they grasped it together, Harry felt the familiar jerk of portkey travel, but this time the sensation was accompanied by something else, a sense of anticipation, of finally moving towards safety rather than away from danger. They materialized on a hillside overlooking a valley that took Harry's breath away. The sun was rising over mountains that stretched to the horizon, their peaks touched with gold and rose. Below them, a small city nestled in the valley, its buildings a mixture of old and new that somehow harmonized perfectly with the natural landscape. "Welcome to Bulgaria," Viktor said softly, pride evident in his voice. "And there," he pointed to a large estate visible on a distant hillside, its elegant buildings surrounded by terraced gardens and protective groves of trees. "There is my family's home. Your new home, if you choose it." As they made their way down the hillside toward the estate, Harry felt something he hadn't experienced in years, the absolute certainty that he was safe. Not the temporary safety of Hogwarts between crises, not the conditional safety that depended on other people's plans and protections, but genuine, lasting safety. The Krum family estate was magnificent in a way that was entirely different from Hogwarts or any British magical dwelling Harry had ever seen. The buildings were constructed of pale stone that seemed to glow with captured sunlight, and the gardens that surrounded them were clearly the work of centuries of careful cultivation. Ancient trees provided shade and privacy, while carefully tended flower beds added splashes of color throughout the grounds. But more impressive than the physical beauty was the sense of peace that permeated the entire place. Harry could feel the protective wards humming softly in the air around them. Not the harsh, military-grade defences of a fortress under siege, but gentle, nurturing magic that welcomed friends and family, while quietly discouraging unwanted visitors. "Victor!" a woman's voice called from the main house, and Harry looked up to see a graceful figure hurrying toward them across the gardens. Victor's mother, Harry realized, noting the strong family resemblance in her dark hair and intelligent eyes. She embraced her son warmly, then turned to examine Harry and Hermione with open curiosity rather than judgment. "Oh, so," she said in heavily accented but fluent English, "these are the young people you wrote about, the ones who needed our protection. Mother, may I present Harry Potter and Hermione Granger? Harry, Hermione, this is my mother, Magdalena Krum." Harry found himself being enveloped in a hug that was warm and welcoming and utterly without reservation. It was the kind of embrace he might have received from Mrs. Weasley, but with something additional, a sense of absolute commitment, as if Magdalena Krum had decided in that instant that he truly was family now. "Welcome, child," she said softly, and Harry felt tears prick at his eyes. "Welcome to your new home." Behind her, Victor's father approached, a tall, distinguished wizard whose presence commanded respect without demanding it. That Victor had clearly inherited his quiet confidence from this man, who examined Harry with the same protective assessment Victor had shown at Hogwarts. "So," he said finally, "you are the boy my son has risked international incident to protect. Tell me, young Harry Potter, was he right to do so?" Harry looked around at the estate, at Victor's parents, at the mountains that surrounded them like protective walls. He thought of Dobby's fierce determination to help him escape, of Hermione's brilliant planning, of Victor's unwavering commitment to his safety. "Yes," he said quietly. "Yes, he was." Victor's father nodded, satisfied. "Then you are welcome here. For as long as you need, or as long as you choose to stay. This is your home now." As they walked toward the house together, Harry flanked by Victor and Hermione, was accepted by Victor's parents as naturally as if he truly were their own son, Harry felt the last of his fear and uncertainty fall away. He was free. He was safe. He was home. For the first time in his life, Harry Potter was exactly where he belonged. Chapter 7. New Foundations. The morning sunlight streaming through the tall windows of Harry's new bedroom felt different somehow, warmer, gentler, free of the weight of expectation and impending doom that had coloured every dawn at Hogwarts. He stretched languidly in the comfortable four-poster bed, marvelling at the simple pleasure of waking up without immediately calculating what dangers the day might hold. 3 days had passed since their arrival at the Krum estate, and Harry was still adjusting to the rhythm of life in a household that operated on principles entirely foreign to his experience. There were no house elves here. Instead, the family maintained their home through a combination of careful magic and shared responsibility that spoke to a fundamentally different approach to wizarding life. A soft knock at his door interrupted his musings. "Harry?" Victor's voice called. "Are you awake? Father would like to speak with you this morning if you are ready." "Coming," Harry called back, pulling on the clothes that Magdalena Krum had procured for him the previous day. The Bulgarian-style robes were well made and comfortable, cut differently than British wizarding wear, but somehow more practical. Everything here seemed designed with function and comfort in mind, rather than tradition and status. He found Victor's father, Dimitri Krum, waiting in the estate's library, a magnificent room, lined floor to ceiling with books, in what Harry assumed were multiple languages. The older wizard looked up from a letter he'd been reading, his expression serious but not unkind. "Good morning, Harry. I hope you slept well." "Better than I have in months," Harry said honestly. "Thank you, sir." "For everything." Dimitri waved away his thanks. "Nonsense. But there are things we must discuss. Sit, please." Harry settled into one of the comfortable chairs near Dimitri's desk, noting the way the morning light caught the dust motes dancing in the air. Even the simple act of sitting in a library felt different here. There was no sense of hiding or urgency, no fear of being discovered in places he shouldn't be. "First," Dmitri began, "or you should know that your disappearance has not gone unnoticed. We have received inquiries from the British Ministry. Diplomatic requests for information about your whereabouts." Harry's stomach tightened. "What did you tell them?" "Nothing yet, but eventually. We will need to make an official response. The Bulgarian ministry is prepared to grant you formal asylum if you wish it, but such a decision carries consequences, you must understand." "What kind of consequences?" Dmitri leaned back in his chair, studying Harry with the same assessing gaze Viktor had inherited. "Once you accept formal asylum from Bulgaria, you become our responsibility. This means you would have our full protection, but it also means that Britain could not demand your return without extraordinary legal proceedings. You would be, in essence, choosing Bulgaria over Britain permanently." The words hung in the air between them. Harry had known intellectually that leaving Britain might be permanent, but hearing it stated so clearly made the reality feel more immediate. "Is that what you'd recommend?" Harry asked. "I cannot make that choice for you, but I can tell you that my family has a long history of providing sanctuary to those who need it, and we have never regretted such decisions. Those who seek our protection are treated as family, with all the rights and responsibilities that entails." Before Harry could respond, Hermione appeared in the library doorway, looking slightly windswept and carrying a thick folder of documents. "Oh, I'm sorry," she said, noting the serious conversation. "I didn't mean to interrupt." "Not at all," Dmitri said, was gesturing for her to join them. "Your timing is perfect, actually. I would like to hear your thoughts as well, Miss Granger. You are Harry's advisor and friend, yes?" Hermione flushed slightly at being addressed so formally, but she took the seat beside Harry with her usual composure. "I've been working with officials at the Bulgarian ministry all morning," she said, "researching the legal frameworks for asylum claims, reviewing precedents, understanding our options." "And your conclusions?" "That Bulgaria has one of the strongest magical asylum programs in Eastern Europe," Hermione said, without hesitation. "The legal protections are comprehensive, and the precedent for protecting British citizens from their own ministry is well established. There was a case in 1979 where Bulgaria successfully protected a family of British witches who were being persecuted for their blood status." Harry looked between them, feeling the weight of decision pressing down on him. "What about you, Hermione? What would asylum mean for you?" "The same thing it would mean for you," she said firmly. "A chance at a life where we make our own choices instead of having them made for us." Dmitri nodded approvingly. Intelligence paired with loyalty. Viktor chose his friends well. He turned back to Harry. "But before you decide anything permanent, perhaps you should experience what life here would actually be like. Viktor has offered to begin your education in Bulgarian magical traditions. Are you interested? The idea of learning magic simply for the joy of it, without the constant threat of needing it to survive, was almost too wonderful to contemplate." "Very much," Harry said. An hour later, Harry found himself in the estate's practice rooms with Viktor, facing his first lesson in Bulgarian defensive magic. The space was unlike anything at Hogwarts, circular rather than rectangular, with smooth stone walls inscribed with protective runes that seemed to pulse with gentle light. "British magic focuses on offense and counter-offense," Viktor explained, his wand held in a relaxed grip that nonetheless suggested complete readiness. "You learn to attack quickly, to overwhelm your opponent before they can react. This approach has its merits, but it also has its limitations." "What do you mean?" "Show me your best defensive spell," Viktor requested. Harry raised his wand and cast a shield charm, watching the familiar translucent barrier spring up between them. Viktor studied it for a moment, then waved his own wand in a complex pattern. Harry felt something change in the magic around them, though he couldn't identify what. "Your shield is strong," Viktor said approvingly. but it is designed to stop specific types of attacks. Watch." Viktor cast what appeared to be a simple stunner, which Harry's shield charm blocked easily. Then he cast something else, a spell Harry didn't recognize, and the red light passed through his shield as if it weren't there at all, dissipating harmlessly just before it reached him. "Bulgarian defensive magic focuses on adaptation rather than resistance," Viktor explained. "Instead of trying to block everything, or create defenses that can adjust to different types of attack." Over the next 2 hours, Viktor taught Harry the basics of adaptive shielding, magic that required deeper understanding of magical theory than anything he'd learned at Hogwarts, but which offered far more flexible protection. It was challenging work, but Harry found himself energized rather than exhausted by the complexity. "You learn quickly," Viktor observed as they concluded the lesson. "British teaching methods may be limited, but you have excellent fundamentals." "This is incredible," Harry said, still marveling at the shield variant he'd finally managed to produce. "Why don't they teach this at Hogwarts?" "Because Hogwarts trains students to fight a specific type of var," Viktor said quietly. "Our approach here is different. Ordve train students to protect themselves and their communities from any threat that might arise." The distinction felt profound to Harry. Protection versus warfare. Community versus individual heroics. It was an entirely different philosophy of magic, and one that resonated deeply with his own instincts. That evening, as they gathered for dinner on the estate's garden terrace, Harry felt more relaxed than he could remember being in years. The conversation flowed easily between English and Bulgarian, with Viktor's parents making an obvious effort to include Harry and Hermione in discussions of everything from magical theory to Bulgarian history, to the best methods for cultivating magical herbs. "Harry," Magdalena said as they finished the main course, "I hope you do not mind, but some letters have arrived for you. They were sent through discreet channels." Harry's heart skipped as she handed him 2 letters, both bearing familiar handwriting. The first was from Ron, his messy scrawl immediately recognizable. "Harry, where are you? People are saying you never came back to the dormitory after the feast, and McGonagall won't tell us anything except that you're safe. Hermione's missing too, and nobody seems to know where either of you went. I'm worried about you, mate. After what happened with Cedric and everything, I know you must be in a bad way, but running off like this isn't like you. Whatever's going on, whatever you're thinking, just remember that you've got friends here who care about you. Write back soon, please. And Mum's already talking about coming to Hogwarts to look for you herself, if she doesn't hear something soon." Ron Harry felt a stab of guilt reading his best friend's worried words. He could picture Ron pacing the Gryffindor common room, trying to make sense of Harry's disappearance, probably blaming himself for not noticing something was wrong. The second letter was from Luna Lovegood, written in her distinctive dreamy script. "Dear Harry, I thought you might like to know that the Rackspurts around Hogwarts have been particularly agitated since you left. They always get confused when someone makes a brave choice that surprises them. I hope wherever you've gone, you're finding the peace you deserve. Some people are saying terrible things about you abandoning your duty, but I think duty can be a very selfish master sometimes. Or the bravest thing might be choosing to live your own life, instead of the one everyone else has planned for you. Your friend, Luna P.S. Hermione's parents received word that she is safe and happy. I thought you should know that her mother cried with relief." Harry looked up to find Hermione watching him with understanding in her eyes. "Difficult?" she asked gently. "Ron's worried. He doesn't understand why we left." Harry folded the letters carefully. "I hate that he's suffering because of my choices." "Your choices were necessary," Viktor said firmly, "and your friend will understand in time, when he sees that you are safer and happier here." "Perhaps you could write to him," Magdalena suggested. "Not to explain everything, but simply to let him know you are well." Harry considered this. Would that be safe? But could they trace letters back here? Not if they go through the proper channels, Dmitri said. They have ways of ensuring correspondence remains private. That night, as Harry prepared for bed, he reflected on the extraordinary changes in his life. 3 days ago, he had been Harry Potter, the boy who lived, the chosen one who was expected to sacrifice everything for the greater good. Tonight, he was simply Harry, a young wizard learning defensive magic from a friend, living with a family that had chosen to protect him simply because it was the right thing to do. As he settled into bed, he could feel the ancient protective wards of the Krum estate humming softly around him. Unlike the harsh, military-grade defenses of Hogwarts, these protections felt warm and nurturing, like being wrapped in a blanket woven from safety itself. For the first time in years, Harry Potter fell asleep without a single thought of the dangers tomorrow might bring. Instead, he dreamed of adaptive shields and garden terraces, of a place where magic was taught for protection rather than warfare, and of the growing possibility that he might actually have a future worth living. Outside his window, the Bulgarian mountains stood sentinel in the moonlight, ancient and enduring and peaceful. And in the house below, Hermione was working late into the night, building the legal framework that would ensure their sanctuary remained secure, while Viktor planned tomorrow's lessons in magical traditions that emphasized community over conflict. Harry was home, and for the first time since he could remember, home felt truly safe. Chapter 8. Shadows of the Past. The owl arrived during breakfast, as its dark feathers ruffled from what had clearly been a long and difficult journey. Harry looked up from his Bulgarian honey pastries, a morning ritual he'd grown to love, as Viktor's father examined the bird with concern. "International post," Dmitri announced grimly, noting the complex array of tracking and authentication charms shimmering around the exhausted owl. "From the Bulgarian ministry. This cannot be good news." He carefully removed the letter, his expression growing darker as he read. Magdalena set down her teacup with unusual force, and Harry felt the familiar knot of anxiety tighten in his stomach. After 10 days of peace, had their sanctuary finally been compromised? "What is it?" Viktor asked, though his tone suggested he already suspected the answer. "The British ministry has escalated their requests," Dmitri said carefully, clearly choosing his words to spare Harry additional worry. "They are no longer asking politely for information about your whereabouts. They are demanding your immediate return, claiming you have been kidnapped." "Kidnapped?" Hermione looked outraged. "We left of our own free will." "Of course you did. But the British ministry is apparently claiming that a 14-year-old boy could not legally make such a decision, and that foreign influences must have coerced you into abandoning your country." Harry felt sick. He should have known Dumbledore wouldn't simply let him disappear. The old wizard had too much invested in his carefully crafted weapon to lose him so easily. "There is worse news," Dmitri continued reluctantly. "Our intelligence sources in Britain report that Death Eater activity has increased significantly since your departure. Attacks on Muggle-borns, intimidation of ministry officials, recruitment drives in areas where support for you-know-who was strong during the last VAR. The war is beginning in earnest," Viktor said quietly. "Yes, and without their symbol to rally around, many British witches and witches are beginning to panic." Harry pushed his plate away, his appetite completely gone. "They're dying because I left." "No," Magdalena said firmly, reaching across the table to take his hand. "They are dying because a madman has returned to power. Not because a traumatized child chose safety over martyrdom." Her words were kind, but Harry could see the worry in her eyes. The pressure was mounting, and everyone in the room knew it. "I should go back," Harry said quietly. "I can't let other people suffer because of my choices." "Harry Potter will do no such thing," Viktor said with surprising force. "You will not be guilted into returning to those who would sacrifice you on the altar of their greater good." Before Harry could respond, another owl appeared at the breakfast room's open windows, this one smaller and more familiar. Harry recognized Pig, Ron's hyperactive owl, immediately. "More letters," Hermione observed, though her tone was wary rather than pleased. There were 3 this time, one from Ron, as expected, one from Ginny, and one bearing the elegant script Harry had learned to dread. Albus Dumbledore. Harry opened Ron's letter first, hoping for understanding but fearing accusation. "Oh, Harry, I don't know what's gotten into you, but this has gone far enough." Mum's beside herself with worry. Dad's been called in for emergency ministry meetings about your disappearance, and the whole wizarding world is in an uproar. People are saying you've been brainwashed, that foreign Death Eaters have taken you to use against Britain. Others are saying you've gone dark yourself, that you've abandoned us when we need you most. I don't believe any of that rubbish. But Harry, you need to come home. Whatever you're running from, whatever you think you're protecting us from by leaving, it's not working. Things are getting worse here, not better. Voldemort's back and people are scared. They need the boy who lived to give them hope. They need you. Please come home. Ron. The letter felt like a physical blow. Harry could hear Ron's desperation in every word, his genuine belief that Harry's return would somehow fix everything. But underneath the worry, there was also an assumption that had always been there, that Harry's life belonged not to himself, but to the wizarding world that had made him their symbol. Ginny's letter was shorter, but no less painful. "Harry, I hope wherever you are, you're happy. I hope you found something that makes this worth it, because the cost has been terrible. Neville's parents were attacked 3 days ago. They survived, barely, but the healers say the new damage to their minds might be permanent. Dean's family is in hiding after Death Eaters burned down their house. Seamus won't even leave the castle anymore. I know you didn't ask to be our hero, but you are our hero, Harry. And heroes don't abandon the people who need them. If you can live with that, then I guess you really have changed." Ginny Harry's hands were shaking by the time he finished Ginny's letter. The guilt was overwhelming, crushing, exactly what he'd feared would happen if he chose himself over the greater good. "Breathe," Hermione said gently, moving to the chair beside him. "Just breathe, Harry." "They're right," he whispered. "People are dying, and I'm here eating honey pastries and learning defensive magic while they fight my battles." "They are fighting their own battles," Viktor corrected firmly. "This is not your var, Harry. This is a var between those who believe in freedom and those who would impose their will through terror. You are not responsible for stopping that by sacrificing yourself." "But I could help by dying," Magdalena asked bluntly. "Because that is what would happen if you returned. You would be used as a weapon until you broke, and then you would be discarded like all the others before you." Harry looked at her sharply. "Others?" "The 17 students," Hermione said softly. "Remember? You're not the first person Dumbledore has sent to die for his cause." With trembling hands, Harry opened Dumbledore's letter. "My dear Harry, I cannot express how deeply concerned I am for your welfare. To learn that you have been spirited away by foreign influences at such a vulnerable time in your young life fills me with profound sorrow. I understand that the events of the tournament were traumatic for you, and I blame myself for not providing you with better support in processing those experiences. However, running away is not the answer, my boy. Your friends need you, your country needs you, and most importantly, you need the guidance and protection that only those who truly understand your unique situation can provide. The path you have chosen leads only to greater suffering, both for yourself and for the innocent people who are even now paying the price for your absence. I implore you to remember who you are, Harry Potter. Remember what you represent. Remember that with great power comes great responsibility, and that responsibility cannot be abandoned simply because the burden feels too heavy. I am prepared to discuss your concerns about your summer accommodations and your future at Hogwarts. We can find alternatives that address your needs while still ensuring you fulfill your destiny. But you must come home first. There are those who would use your current vulnerability to turn you against your own people. Do not let them succeed where Voldemort himself has failed. With deepest affection and concern, Albus Dumbledore. The letter was a masterpiece of emotional manipulation, Harry realized with a clarity that surprised him. Every word was carefully chosen to maximize guilt while offering just enough apparent compromise to seem reasonable. It was exactly the sort of thing that would have worked on him 6 months ago. "Manipulative bastard," Hermione said, reading over his shoulder. "Hermione," Harry said, shocked by her language. "Well, he is. Look at this. He's trying to make you feel guilty for choosing safety, trying to convince you that you're being manipulated by us, while he's the one doing the manipulating." Her voice was rising with indignation. "And that bit about your unique situation, as if being traumatized and exploited makes you special rather than a victim." Victor's mother was reading the letter as well, her expression growing colder with each line. "This man," she said finally, "is exactly the sort of person our asylum laws were designed to protect children from." "You see it too?" Harry asked hopefully. "Harry," Magdalena said gently, "would you be comfortable telling us about your experiences with these people? Not just at school, but before. At home with your relatives?" Something in her tone, gentle but uncompromising, like a healer about to examine a painful wound, made Harry's defenses crumble. For the first time since arriving in Bulgaria, he found himself truly ready to talk about the Dursleys. It started slowly, haltingly. The cupboard under the stairs, the bars on his windows, the starvation, the isolation, the constant message that he was worthless, unwanted, a freak who should be grateful for any scrap of tolerance. But as he spoke, encouraged by the growing horror in the Krum family's expressions, the words came faster. Years of abuse poured out. Physical, emotional, psychological. The way Dudley had been encouraged to hunt him. The way his uncle had raged about magic and freakishness. The way his aunt had looked at him as if he were something diseased. "And Dumbledore knew?" Dimitri asked quietly, when Harry finally fell silent. "He had to have known. He has people watching the house, Mrs. Figg and others. And when I got to Hogwarts, I was so small compared to the other kids, so afraid of getting in trouble." Harry's voice broke slightly. "But he always sent me back. Every summer, no matter how much I begged to stay at school, he said it was for my own protection." "Protection," Victor repeated, and there was murder in his voice. "Harry," Magdalena said carefully, "in Bulgaria, if a child were being treated as you describe, the authorities would remove that child from the home immediately. The guardians would face criminal charges, and the child would be placed with a family who could provide proper care. But in Britain, apparently, children can be sacrificed for the greater good without consequence." The silence that followed was heavy with implications. Harry looked around the breakfast room, at Victor, whose jaw was clenched with protective fury, at Hermione, whose eyes were bright with unshed tears of anger, at Dimitri and Magdalena, who looked at him with the sort of parental concern he'd never experienced before. "I can't go back," he said finally, and for the first time since reading the letters, he felt certain of his choice. "I can't go back to that. I can't let them use me any more." "You will not have to," Magdalena said firmly. "I will not let anyone take you from this house to be harmed again. Never again." The maternal protectiveness in her voice was something Harry had dreamed of but never experienced. This was what it felt like to have someone fight for him, not because of what he could do for them, but simply because he mattered. "But the pressure will only increase," Hermione warned. "Dumbledore won't give up easily, and if Death Eater activity is escalating, then perhaps it is time for us to disappear more completely," Victor suggested. "My family has properties in the deep mountains, places where even our own ministry would have trouble finding us if we chose not to be found." That seems extreme, Harry started to say. Harry, Dmitri interrupted gently. There is something else you should know. Our intelligence sources report that Voldemort has placed a substantial bounty on information about your location. He is actively seeking you, and we have reason to believe he has agents working to infiltrate our ministry. The words hit Harry like ice water. He's looking for me specifically? Of course he is, Hermione said grimly. You're the one who escaped him in the graveyard, the one who can testify to his return. And now you're beyond Dumbledore's protection, beyond Britain's borders. From his perspective, you're a threat that needs to be eliminated. Or captured and used, Viktor added darkly. Harry felt the familiar weight of being hunted settling over him. But this time it was different. This time he wasn't facing the threat alone, and he wasn't being asked to sacrifice himself for others' plans. The mountain house, he said decisively. When do we leave? Tomorrow, Dmitri said immediately. I will make the arrangements tonight. Are you sure? Hermione asked, though Harry could see she was already planning their departure. Once we go that deep underground, then we go underground, Harry said firmly. I'd rather be free in the mountains than a weapon in Dumbledore's war. As they rose from the breakfast table to begin preparations for their deeper disappearance, Harry caught Hermione and Viktor exchanging a look that spoke volumes. In the stress and danger of the past weeks, their mutual respect had deepened into something more profound. He was happy for them, he realized. Here, away from the expectations and complications of Hogwarts, they were free to discover what they might mean to each other. Just as he was free to discover who he might be when he wasn't being molded into someone else's weapon. The shadows of his past were long and dark, but for the first time in his life, Harry Potter was walking toward the light. Chapter 9. The hunt intensifies. The mountain safe house was a revelation, not just in terms of security, but in how it made Harry feel truly invisible for the first time in his life. Nestled high in the Rhodope Mountains, the ancient stone building was protected by wards so old and complex that they had become part of the mountain itself. Here, 3 weeks into their Bulgarian sanctuary, Harry was discovering aspects of magic that Hogwarts had never even hinted at. Concentrate on the feeling of the earth beneath your feet, instructed Master Yankov, the elderly Bulgarian wizard who served as Harry's primary tutor. British magic teaches you to impose your will upon the Vold. Bulgarian magic teaches you to walk with the Vold's natural forces. Harry closed his eyes, feeling the warmth of the mountain stone through his bare feet, sensing the deep currents of magical energy that flowed through the peaks like underground rivers. When he opened his eyes and cast the protection charm, the shield that formed was unlike anything he'd produced at Hogwarts, not the hard, translucent barrier of a traditional shield charm, but something that seemed to breathe and pulse with life. "Excellent," Master Yankov said, though his praise was measured. "You are beginning to understand. Your potential has been constrained by your previous education." That was becoming increasingly clear to Harry. Under the patient guidance of his Bulgarian tutors, abilities that had been suppressed or dismissed at Hogwarts were emerging. His wandless magic, which had always been treated as accidental or uncontrolled, was being refined into a powerful tool. His instinctive understanding of defensive spells was being expanded into a comprehensive magical philosophy. "But you were never taught to trust your instincts," observed Hermione, who was taking a break from her own studies to watch his lesson. "At Hogwarts, they wanted you to follow prescribed methods, to do magic the proper way." "The proper way for whom?" Master Yankov asked pointedly. "For those who wish to control what you could become?" The implication hung heavy in the mountain air. Harry was beginning to understand that his magical education at Hogwarts had been as much about limitation as instruction, keeping him powerful enough to be useful, but not powerful enough to be independent. Their peaceful morning routine was interrupted by Viktor's urgent approach, his expression grim as he climbed the path to their practice area. "We have a problem," he announced without preamble. "Dmitri received word from our contacts in Sofia, or there have been Inquiries about British refugees in the Magical Quarter. Strangers asking questions, offering gold for information. Harry's stomach dropped. Death Eaters? Almost certainly. They are being discreet about it, posing as concerned British ministry officials, but the descriptions match known agents from our intelligence files. How close are they? Hermione asked, immediately shifting into strategic mode. Close enough that my father believes VR should activate additional security measures. He is calling in favors from old teammates, former Bulgarian national team members who can be trusted absolutely. The idea of Quidditch players serving as bodyguards would have seemed absurd to Harry a month ago, but he'd learned to trust Victor's judgment about such things. Professional Quidditch players were among the most physically capable wizards in the world, with reflexes and magical stamina that made them formidable opponents. How many? Master Yankov asked, his scholarly demeanor shifting to something more tactical. 6 initially. Georgi Petrov and Lev Volkov will arrive this afternoon, along with 4 others. All former national team, all completely loyal to my family. As if summoned by their discussion, a silver raven Patronus materialized in their midst, speaking in Dmitri Krum's urgent voice. Emergency! Return to the house immediately. We have visitors. The trio exchanged alarmed glances before hurrying down the mountain path toward the safe house. Harry's newly enhanced magical senses were tingling with alarm. Something was definitely wrong. They found Dmitri in the house's main room, speaking in rapid Bulgarian with 2 men Harry didn't recognize. Both wore the practical traveling robes of international wizards, but something in their posture suggested they were accustomed to violence. Ah, Viktor, Dmitri switched to English as they entered. Allow me to introduce Georgi Petrov and Lev Volkov, formerly of the Bulgarian national Quidditch team, currently of the Bulgarian Aura Corps. The 2 men studied Harry with professional interest, not the awed recognition he was used to, but the assessment of bodyguards evaluating their charge. The boy is smaller than expected, Georgi observed in heavily accented English, but his magical signature is impressive, strong, but well-controlled. The years of suppression are ending, Master Yankov explained. Or his true abilities are beginning to emerge. Good, Lev said pragmatically. He will need them. We have troubling news from our contacts in Western Europe. Dmitri's expression grew even more serious. Tell them. 3 Death Eater cells have been confirmed operating in neighboring countries, Georgi reported. Romania, Serbia, and Greece all report mysterious deaths among their magical populations. Anyone who might have information about British refugees. Harry felt sick. They're killing innocent people looking for me. They are killing innocent people because they are monsters, Hermione corrected firmly. This is not your fault, Harry. Miss Granger is correct, Lev agreed, but it does mean the danger is escalating. They have also received word that your parents, Miss Granger, have been approached by suspicious individuals in London. Hermione went pale. Are they safe? For now, yes. Bulgarian diplomatic security has quietly relocated them to a safe house in the countryside, along with several other families who might be at risk because of their connections to you. The knowledge that Hermione's parents were now in danger because of their association with him made Harry's chest tighten with familiar guilt. But before he could spiral into self-recrimination, Viktor placed a firm hand on his shoulder. This is what happens in VAR, Harry. Innocent people suffer regardless of what you choose to do. The only difference is whether you survive to help end the VAR, or whether you die as a symbol that changes nothing. Their grim discussion was interrupted by the arrival of an owl Harry recognized, Luna Lovegood's distinctive tawny bird, looking somewhat ruffled from its long journey. Luna's letter, when Harry opened it, was typically direct in its dreamy way. Dear Harry, the Rackspurts around Hogwarts have become quite agitated lately, probably because of all the lies being told about you. The Daily Prophet is running stories about how you've been brainwashed by foreign dark wizards, and Minister Fudge gave a speech about the importance of not letting terrorists steal British heroes. Most of the students don't believe it, of course. We know you better than that. But some of the adults are getting rather worked up about it all. Professor Umbridge has been appointed as Defense Against the Dark Arts teacher, and she's been giving lectures about the dangers of being influenced by foreign propaganda. She seems particularly interested in talking about you, though she always refers to you as the missing student, rather than using your name. I thought you should know that Neville has been asking questions about what really happened the night you disappeared. He's getting suspicious about the official story, especially since Hermione vanished the same night. Neville's much cleverer than people give him credit for. I hope you're learning interesting things wherever you are. The magical signatures around Bulgaria have been quite fascinating lately. Lots of protective energy flowing toward the mountains. Your friend, Luna P.S., don't feel guilty about the people who are suffering. They would be suffering anyway, and at least this way you might survive long enough to actually help them. Harry looked up from the letter to find everyone watching him expectantly. More propaganda, he summarized. But also, they've appointed someone named Umbridge as the new defense teacher. Luna says she's particularly interested in me. Umbridge, Hermione repeated, her expression thoughtful. I've heard that name. She's senior undersecretary to the minister, isn't she? Very much Fudge's creature. If they are placing ministry officials as teachers at Hogwarts, what it suggests they are preparing for something, Master Yankov observed. Perhaps they intend to use the school as a base of operations in their search for you. The thought of Hogwarts being turned into a tool for hunting him was deeply disturbing to Harry. The school had been many things, dangerous, manipulative, constraining, but it had also been the first place he'd experienced friendship and belonging. We need to accelerate your training, Viktor decided. If they are escalating their search, you must be prepared to defend yourself should our other protections fail. I agree, said Georgie. The boy's magical development is impressive, but he lacks the combat experience to face determined opponents. Then we teach him, Lev said simply. Former Quidditch players know something about operating under pressure. Over the following days, Harry's education took on a new urgency. His morning lessons with Master Yankov continued, but now they were supplemented by intensive combat training with Viktor's Quidditch player guards. These men approached defensive magic like they had once approached the Golden Snitch, with split-second timing, absolute focus, and the understanding that failure meant more than just losing a game. British Aurors fight like duelists, Georgie explained during one particularly grueling session. Very formal, very controlled. Death Eaters fight like animals, vicious, unpredictable, willing to use any advantage. So how do VE fight them? Viktor asked, though Harry suspected he already knew the answer. Like Quidditch players, Lev said with a grin that was not entirely pleasant. Fast, dirty, and always thinking 3 moves ahead. Harry found himself learning combat magic that bore little resemblance to anything taught at Hogwarts. These were techniques designed not for formal dueling, but for survival. Spells that could be cast while running, wards that could be erected in seconds, defensive maneuvers that used the environment as much as the wand. You are beginning to think like a winner instead of a victim, Master Yankov observed approvingly, after Harry successfully demonstrated a complex counter-jinx sequence. This is good. Victims do not survive VARs. Hermione, meanwhile, was developing her own innovations, hybrid techniques that combined British theoretical knowledge with Bulgarian practical applications. Harry watched in fascination as she demonstrated a tracking ward that could identify hostile intent from nearly a mile away. It's brilliant, he told her during one of their evening strategy sessions. You're creating entirely new magic. They're creating entirely new magic, she corrected, gesturing to include Viktor in the praise. This wouldn't be possible without his insights into Bulgarian theory. The look that passed between Viktor and Hermione during that exchange spoke volumes. Their partnership was deepening into something more profound than either of them had initially expected. Their growing sense of security was shattered 3 days later, when Lev burst into the house, at dawn, his usual calm demeanor replaced by urgent alarm. "They have found our general area," he announced without preamble. Death Eater agents we're spotted in the village below, asking about the old mountain houses. We have perhaps 6 hours before they begin a systematic search of the peaks. "Time to disappear again?" Harry asked, though he already knew the answer. "Time to disappear again," Dmitri confirmed grimly. "But this time, we go deeper into the mountains, to places even we have trouble finding." As they hastily packed their essential belongings, Harry reflected on how much had changed since his arrival in Bulgaria. He was stronger now, both magically and emotionally, than he had ever been at Hogwarts. He had allies who were fighting to protect him rather than use him, tutors who were helping him reach his potential rather than limiting it, and for the first time in his life, a genuine sense of family. The Death Eaters could hunt him across Europe if they wanted to, but they would find that Harry Potter was no longer the frightened boy who had stumbled through his education at Hogwarts, accepting whatever scraps of training were deemed sufficient for his role as a weapon. He was becoming something else entirely. Something that neither Dumbledore nor Voldemort had planned for. He was becoming free. And as they disappeared into the deep mountains of Bulgaria, following paths known only to Victor's family for generations, Harry Potter smiled grimly. Let them come. He was ready. For the first time in his life, Harry Potter was truly ready to fight, not for someone else's cause, but for his own right to choose his destiny. Chapter 10. Love and War. The deep mountain sanctuary felt like another world entirely, a place where time moved differently, where the weight of prophecies and destinies couldn't reach through the ancient stone and protective wards that had stood for centuries. Here, nearly a month after their escape from Britain, Harry was discovering what it meant to simply live rather than merely survive. He sat on the sanctuary's observation deck, watching the sunrise paint the distant peaks in shades of gold and rose when Viktor found him with the morning's intelligence reports. The Bulgarian's expression was grim, though he tried to soften it when he saw Harry's peaceful demeanor. "Bad news?" Harry asked, though he already knew the answer from Victor's reluctant approach. "The war in Britain has begun in earnest," Viktor said quietly, settling beside him with the collection of encrypted messages. 3 major attacks in the last week alone. The Ministry is struggling to respond effectively. Harry's chest tightened with familiar guilt. "How many casualties?" "Too many." "But Harry," Viktor placed a firm hand on his shoulder, "you must understand. This would be happening regardless of where you are. Voldemort did not return to power because you left Britain. He returned to power because that was always his plan." The words were logical, but they did little to ease the weight of responsibility Harry felt for every British witch and wizard who fell while he remained safe in his mountain fortress. He scanned the reports Viktor had brought, noting the names of places he recognized, the descriptions of attacks on families who had done nothing wrong except exist in a world where madmen sought power. "Diagon Alley was hit 2 days ago," Viktor continued gently. "Ollivanders is gone, along with several other shops. But the casualties were light. Most people had already gone into hiding or left London entirely. And my friends? Safe as far as we know, though," Viktor hesitated, "there have been developments you should know about." Before Harry could ask for details, Hermione appeared in the doorway, practically glowing with happiness, despite the serious nature of their morning briefing. In her hand, she carried a letter bearing Luna Lovegood's distinctive handwriting. "News from Hogwarts," she announced, though her expression suggested the letter contained more than just school updates. And Viktor. She looked at him with such open affection that Harry felt a strange mixture of happiness and longing. "Did you tell him about our conversation last night?" Victor's cheeks actually colored slightly. "I was building up to it." "What conversation?" Harry asked, though he suspected he already knew. "Viktor asked me to marry him," Hermione said simply, though her smile could have lit up the entire mountain range. Harry felt his heart lift, despite the grim intelligence reports. "Hermione, that's wonderful. I'm so happy for you both." "You approve?" Viktor asked, and Harry could hear the genuine concern in his voice. "Of course I approve. You two are perfect for each other. I've been watching you work together for weeks now, and it's obvious how much you care about each other." It was true. Over their month in Bulgaria, Harry had watched Viktor and Hermione develop from mutual respect into something deeper and more profound. They challenged each other intellectually, supported each other emotionally, and shared a vision of magic as something that should protect and nurture rather than dominate and control. "When?" Harry asked. "Not until the VAR is over," Hermione said firmly. "We won't celebrate while people are dying, but—" She looked at Viktor with eyes that sparkled with unshed tears. "When the time is right, when there's peace again, yes. I want to build a life with Viktor. Here, in Bulgaria, away from all the expectations and manipulations of Britain." "Speaking of which," Viktor said, returning to the more immediate concerns, "Luna's letter has interesting information about the current situation at Hogwarts." Hermione unfolded the letter and began reading aloud. "Dear Harry and friends, the Nargles have been particularly active around the castle lately, probably because Professor Umbridge keeps spreading confusion wherever she goes. She's implemented a new rule that all student mail must be inspected before being sent, which is why I'm having to use rather creative methods to get this to you. Ron has stopped sending his angry letters, mostly because Professor McGonagall sat him down for what Ginny described as the most terrifying conversation of his life. Apparently, she told him some home truths about loyalty and friendship that left him rather shaken. He's been asking people to pray for your safety instead of demanding your return. Ginny wanted me to tell you that she understands now why you left, and she's sorry for the cruel things she wrote before. She says if she were in your position, she would have made the same choice. Professor Dumbledore has been absent from the castle for increasingly long periods, and when he is here, he looks like someone has been playing very unpleasant music in his head. Professor Snape mentioned to Professor McGonagall, not realizing I was nearby, that the headmaster has been making increasingly desperate inquiries through international channels. The most interesting development is that several other students have begun asking uncomfortable questions about why you really left. Neville, in particular, has been very vocal about how the school failed to protect you properly. He's been reading about historical incidents at Hogwarts and making some rather pointed observations about patterns of student endangerment. I thought you should also know that rumors are spreading about your supposed kidnapping by foreign dark wizards. Most of the younger students don't believe it, but some of the older ones who remember the First War are getting worried about international involvement. I hope, wherever you are, you've found the family you always deserved. Love, Luna P.S. There's been talk of a formal alliance between several international magical governments to combat you-know-who's return. Bulgaria is apparently taking a leading role in these discussions. Harry looked up from the letter to find Viktor and Hermione watching him carefully. An international alliance, he mused. That's actually encouraging. More than encouraging, Viktor said with obvious pride. My father has been instrumental in organizing the coalition. Bulgaria, along with Romania, Hungary, and several other Eastern European nations, are preparing to offer military support to Britain, if requested. But they haven't requested it yet. The British ministry is stubborn about accepting foreign assistance. They still believe they can handle Voldemort internally. Hermione snorted. Their pride is going to get people killed. Yes, Viktor agreed grimly. But it also means that when they finally do ask for help, they will be much more grateful for what they receive, and much less likely to make demands about the return of certain refugees. The implication was clear. The longer Britain struggled alone against Voldemort, the stronger Bulgaria's position became in protecting Harry from extradition demands. There is something else, Viktor continued, his expression growing serious. My father has been in contact with certain discreet sources within the British government. It seems that Dumbledore has been making increasingly frantic efforts to locate you, including some rather questionable alliances with individuals of dubious reputation. What kind of questionable alliances? Hermione asked sharply. The sort that suggest he is willing to compromise his principles in order to retrieve his weapon, Viktor replied carefully. Harry felt a chill that had nothing to do with the mountain air. He's working with criminals to try to find me. We believe so. Nothing confirmed yet, but the intelligence suggests he is exploring, unofficial, channels for information about your whereabouts. The knowledge that Dumbledore was potentially compromising everything he claimed to stand for in order to drag Harry back to Britain was somehow more disturbing than news of Death Eater attacks. At least Voldemort's evil was honest. He didn't pretend to have Harry's best interests at heart while manipulating him toward an early grave. Their serious discussion was interrupted by a light knock on the observation deck's doorframe. Harry looked up to see Katerina, the daughter of the Mountain Sanctuary's caretakers, and his newest friend in this strange new world. At 15, she was exactly Harry's age, with the dark hair and intelligent eyes that seemed common among Bulgarian magical families. More importantly, she was the first person Harry had ever met who knew nothing of his fame and cared nothing for his supposed destiny. To her, he was simply Harry, a British boy learning to appreciate Bulgarian culture and magic. "Good morning," she said in lightly accented English, though Harry had been teaching her some British slang in exchange for Bulgarian lessons. "I hope I'm not interrupting important discussions." "Not at all," Hermione said warmly, shooting Harry a knowing look. "We were just finishing up." Harry felt his cheeks warm slightly. Over the past 2 weeks, he had found himself increasingly drawn to Katerina's company. She was intelligent without being intimidating, kind without being pitying, and she had a way of making him laugh that reminded him how young he actually was. "I was wondering," Katerina continued, directing her attention to Harry, "if you would like to see the lower caves today. My grandfather says there are some very old magical formations there that might interest you." "I'd love to," Harry said, perhaps a bit too quickly. As Katerina smiled and retreated to gather supplies for their exploration, Viktor and Hermione exchanged amused glances. "She's good for you," Hermione observed. "I haven't seen you this relaxed and happy since, well, maybe ever." "She doesn't see the boy who lived when she looks at me," Harry said quietly. "She just sees Harry. I never realized how rare that was until I found it." "This is what normal feels like," Viktor said gently. "Or this is what you were supposed to have all along. Friends who care about you for yourself, the freedom to explore relationships at your own pace, the chance to discover who you are without everyone else's expectations defining you." Later that evening, as they gathered for dinner on the sanctuary's main terrace, Harry found himself marveling at how dramatically his life had changed in just 1 month. Here he sat, sharing a meal with people who had chosen to become his family, not because of prophecy or obligation, but simply because they cared about him. Viktor and Hermione were deep in discussion about their future plans, their hands intertwined and their voices soft with shared dreams. Katerina was teaching Harry a Bulgarian card game that involved more laughter than actual strategy. Master Yankov was debating magical theory with Dmitri, while Magdalena fussed over everyone's dinner portions with the fierce affection of a true mother. "Harry," Dmitri said during a lull in conversation, "there is something Magdalena and I have been discussing, and we would like your thoughts on it." Harry looked up from his cards, noting the serious tone in Dmitri's voice. "We have been considering, that is to say, if you were amenable to the idea, we would like to formally adopt you into our family." The words hit Harry like a physical blow, not of pain but of overwhelming emotion. You want to adopt me?" "You are already our son in every way that matters," Magdalena said gently. "The legal adoption would simply recognize what has already occurred in our hearts. It would also provide you with additional legal protections, Bulgarian citizenship, and—" she smiled through tears. "It would give you a family name you could be proud to carry." Harry looked around the table at the faces of the people who had risked everything to protect him, who had given him safety and love and the chance to discover who he might become. For the first time in his life, someone was offering him a family, not because they had to, but because they wanted to. His voice broke slightly. I would be honored to be your son. The celebration that followed was unlike anything Harry had ever experienced. There were tears and laughter and embraces, and through it all, the absolute certainty that he had finally found where he belonged. As the evening wound down and they began to drift off to their respective rooms, Hermione pulled Harry aside for a quiet moment. "Are you truly happy?" she asked, searching his face for any sign of doubt or regret. "Happier than I ever thought possible," Harry said honestly. "For the first time in my life, I'm not afraid of tomorrow. I'm not waiting for the next crisis, the next person who wants to use me for something. I'm just living." "Good," she said fiercely. "Because you deserve this, Harry. You deserve love and safety and the chance to choose your own future." "So do you," he replied, noting the soft glow of contentment that seemed to emanate from her these days. "You and Viktor are going to have a wonderful life together." "Away from Britain," she said, though there was no sadness in it anymore. It was away from the expectations and the manipulations and the endless cycle of crisis and heroism. "Do you ever regret it? Leaving everything behind?" Hermione was quiet for a moment, considering the question seriously. "I regret the pain our leaving caused people like Ron and Ginny. But the choice itself? Never. We're alive, Harry. We're truly alive for the first time since we entered the wizarding world, and that's worth any sacrifice." That night, as Harry prepared for bed in his room in the mountain sanctuary, he reflected on the extraordinary transformation his life had undergone. A month ago, he had been Harry Potter, the boy who lived, trapped in a destiny others had written for him. Tonight, he was simply Harry Krum, adopted son, beloved friend, promising student of magic, and perhaps most importantly, a young man with the freedom to write his own story. Outside his window, the Bulgarian mountains stood eternal and protective in the moonlight, and tomorrow would bring new lessons, new discoveries, new moments of simple happiness that he had never dared to imagine possible. For the first time in his life, Harry Potter, now Harry Krum, was exactly where he belonged. Chapter 11. The Price of Freedom. The morning mist had barely clawed from the mountain peaks when the wards began screaming their warnings, not the gentle chimes that announced expected visitors, but the harsh, discordant wail that meant someone was attempting to breach the sanctuary's ancient protections through brute magical force. Harry was in the middle of his morning defensive practice with Master Yankov when the alarms began. Ott and his newly honed instincts immediately identified the magical signature pressing against their barriers. It was familiar, powerful, and carrying with it the unmistakable aura of righteous authority that had once made him feel safe. Now it just made him angry. "Dumbledore," he said quietly, lowering his wand as the older wizard's magical pressure continued to build against their defenses. "You are certain?" Master Yankov asked, though his expression suggested he already knew the answer. "I'd recognize that magical signature anywhere. He's here, and he's not taking no for an answer." Viktor appeared at the practice room's entrance, his face grim with purpose. He brought others, 3 British auras and someone from their ministry's International Magical Cooperation Office. "They are demanding you be turned over immediately under emergency extradition provisions." "On what grounds?" Hermione asked, appearing behind Viktor with an armload of legal documents she'd clearly been preparing for this exact scenario. "They claim you have been kidnapped and brainwashed by foreign Death Eaters," Viktor replied, his voice tight with controlled fury. "They say you are not mentally competent to make decisions about your own welfare." Harry felt something cold and sharp settle in his chest, not fear, but clarity. After 5 weeks of safety and healing, after discovering what it meant to be genuinely protected rather than manipulated, Dumbledore's tactics seemed transparently obvious. "Where are my parents?" Harry asked, using the term deliberately. He was Harry Krum now, legally and emotionally. And the Krums had given him something Dumbledore never had, the right to choose his own path. Speaking with the Bulgarian ministry officials who accompanied them, Viktor said, "Father is citing international asylum law and your rights as a newly adopted Bulgarian citizen, but Dumbledore is claiming that the adoption was illegal because you are British property." "British property," Hermione repeated, her voice dangerous. "Not a British citizen. Property." Their exact words, according to the diplomatic report. Harry stood slowly, feeling the weight of decision settling over him like armor. "I want to see him." "Harry," Viktor started. "No, I want to face him directly. I want him to look me in the eyes and explain why he thinks he owns me." "It could be dangerous," Master Yankov warned. "Dumbledore is desperate now, and desperate men do desperate things." "Then it's a good thing I'm not alone," Harry said, looking around at the faces of the people who had chosen to protect him. "And it's a good thing I'm not the same frightened boy who ran away from Hogwarts 5 weeks ago." The confrontation took place in the sanctuary's main hall, a circular chamber carved from living stone with ancient protective runes glowing softly in the walls. Harry entered, flanked by Viktor and Hermione, with Master Yankov and the Krum family's legal representative following behind. Across from them stood Albus Dumbledore, looking older and wearier than Harry remembered, accompanied by 3 grim-faced Aurors and a nervous ministry official. "Harry, my boy," Dumbledore said, his voice carrying the familiar tone of gentle authority that had once made Harry feel protected, "for I cannot tell you how relieved I am to see you safe. When we learned you had been taken—" "I wasn't taken," Harry interrupted, his voice steady and clear. "I left, of my own free will, to escape a situation that was slowly killing me. You were traumatized, confused, manipulated by foreign influences." "I was manipulated," Harry agreed, "but not by anyone in this room." The silence that followed was electric with tension. Dumbledore's blue eyes, usually twinkling with benevolent wisdom, were hard and calculating as he studied Harry's face. "I understand why you might feel that way," Dumbledore said carefully. "The events of the tournament were indeed traumatic, and I blame myself for not providing you with better support afterward. But Harry, you must understand. Your place is in Britain, with your own people, or fighting for the cause your parents died to defend." "My parents," Harry said quietly, "died fighting Voldemort. They didn't die fighting for you, or for your vision of how their son should live his life. Your parents died to protect you, so that you could fulfill your destiny." "My parents died because a madman wanted to murder their baby," Harry corrected sharply. "They didn't sacrifice themselves, so you could turn me into a weapon." Dumbledore's expression hardened slightly. "I see they have filled your head with poison against those who care for you most." "No," Harry said, his voice growing stronger. "They've helped me understand what caring actually looks like. Caring looks like teaching me magic that will keep me safe, rather than magic that will make me more effective in the battle. And caring looks like asking what I want, instead of deciding what's best for me. Caring looks like protecting me from danger, instead of deliberately placing me in it to test my resolve. Sometimes difficult choices must be made for the greater good." "Whose greater good?" Hermione interjected, stepping forward with her armload of documentation. "Harry's, or yours?" She spread the documents across the room's central table with practiced efficiency. "These are copies of Hogwarts historical records, Professor Dumbledore. Records showing that 17 students have died during your tenure as headmaster or deputy headmaster, all while engaged in activities deemed necessary for your greater good." Dumbledore's expression tightened. "Those were tragic accidents." "Accidents?" Hermione's voice rose. "Thomas Riddle, investigating the Chamber of Secrets on your direct orders, found dead under mysterious circumstances. Sarah Brightwater, killed testing defensive wards you had her research. Michael Clearwater died in the Forbidden Forest during a training exercise you supervised. Those children chose to serve. They were children, Viktor said forcefully, speaking for the first time since Dumbledore's arrival. Children cannot choose to die for your cause, because children cannot fully understand what such a choice means. This is why civilized nations have laws protecting minors from such exploitation. You speak of exploitation while holding a British citizen against his will. I am not a British citizen, Harry said clearly. I am Harry Krum, legally adopted son of Dmitri and Magdalena Krum, citizen of Bulgaria. And I am here by choice. Dumbledore's mask of gentle concern finally slipped entirely. You are Harry Potter, the boy who lived, and you have responsibilities that transcend whatever affections you may have developed for your captors. The word captors hung in the air like a curse. Harry felt Viktor stiffen beside him, saw the flash of anger that crossed Hermione's face, and realized that this was the moment he had been unconsciously preparing for since his first night in Bulgaria. No, he said simply. I am not the boy who lived. I am not your weapon. I am not your symbol. I am a 15-year-old boy who has every right to choose his own family, his own home, and his own future. Your future was written in prophecy long before you were born. Prophecies, Harry said with growing confidence, are not magical contracts, but they are possibilities, not certainties. And I choose to make this possibility impossible. You would abandon your friends, your country, your very identity. I would choose to live, Harry replied, something you have never given me the option to do. The British auras were growing restless, and Harry could see them exchanging glances that suggested they were preparing to act. But before they could move, the chamber's doors opened to admit Dmitri Krum, flanked by several Bulgarian ministry officials and what appeared to be an international magical law enforcement team. Professor Dumbledore, Dmitri said formally, you are attempting to remove a Bulgarian citizen from his home against his will, using threats of force. This constitutes an act of international kidnapping under the Rome Convention on Magical Rights. This boy is British. This young man, corrected the lead Bulgarian official, is a legally adopted Bulgarian citizen who has formally requested asylum from persecution by British magical authorities. His adoption papers, asylum application, and citizenship documents are all in perfect order. The adoption was fraudulent, performed on a minor who lacked the legal capacity. The adoption, Hermione said calmly, was performed in accordance with Bulgarian law, which recognizes the right of mature minors to choose their own guardians when their current situation places them in physical or emotional danger. Harry's testimony regarding his treatment at the hands of British authorities more than satisfies the legal requirements. She produced another set of documents. These are depositions from international magical rights observers who have interviewed Harry extensively about his experiences in Britain. The pattern of endangerment, manipulation, and emotional abuse is thoroughly documented. Dumbledore's face had gone pale. You don't understand what you're doing. Without Harry, without the boy who lived to rally around, Britain will fall to Voldemort. Thousands will die. Thousands are already dying, Harry said quietly. They were dying when I was in Britain too. The only difference is that now I might actually survive long enough to help them properly instead of being thrown against Voldemort like a sacrificial lamb. You were being prepared. I was being groomed for martyrdom, Harry corrected. There's a difference. The chamber fell silent except for the soft hum of the protective wards. Finally, Dumbledore straightened his shoulders and fixed Harry with a stare that was no longer grandfatherly, but coldly authoritative. If you will not come willingly, then I must consider other options. The threat was unmistakable. Harry saw the British auras reaching for their wands, saw the ministry official stepping back in alarm, saw Viktor moving to place himself between Harry and the potential threat. Professor Dumbledore, the Bulgarian ministry official said sharply, you are threatening violence against a Bulgarian citizen on Bulgarian soil. This is an act of war." "This is a rescue mission," Dumbledore replied, his wand appearing in his hand with fluid grace. "Harry Potter is too valuable to the cause of good to be left in the hands of those who would corrupt his purpose." "Then you will have to go through me," Viktor said simply, his own wand rising to meet Dumbledore's. What happened next would later be recorded in the international magical law journals as one of the most significant magical confrontations of the modern era. Viktor Krum, champion of Bulgaria, standing against Albus Dumbledore, hero of the wizarding world, not for glory or conquest, but for the simple right of a young man to choose his own destiny. The duel was brief but spectacular. Dumbledore's magic was powerful, ancient, refined by decades of experience and necessity. But Viktor's magic was something else entirely. Younger, fiercer, fueled not by duty or destiny, but by love and the absolute conviction that he was fighting for something right and good. When the light faded and the echoes of their spells stopped reverberating through the stone chamber, Viktor was still standing, his wand steady, while Dumbledore knelt on the floor, defeated not by superior power, but by superior purpose. "It is finished," the Bulgarian ministry official announced formally. "Harry Krum is officially granted permanent asylum in Bulgaria, with all rights and protections accorded to Bulgarian citizens. Any further attempts to remove him from this country will be treated as acts of international aggression." Dumbledore looked up from the floor, his eyes meeting Harry's across the chamber. In that gaze, Harry saw not the disappointed grandfather or the concerned mentor, but the general who had just lost his most valuable weapon. "You don't know what you've done," Dumbledore said quietly. "Yes," Harry replied with absolute certainty. "I do. I've chosen to live my own life instead of dying for yours." As the British delegation was escorted from the sanctuary under heavy guard, Harry felt the last chains of his old life finally fall away. He was free, not just legally, but emotionally, spiritually, completely. He was Harry Krum, son of Bulgaria, student of magic, friend and beloved of people who valued him for who he was, rather than what he could do for them. He was finally, truly free. And in the mountains of Bulgaria, surrounded by family chosen rather than assigned, Harry Potter smiled and began to plan the rest of his life, a life that would be entirely his own. Chapter 12. New Beginnings. 5 years had transformed Harry Krum in ways that would have been unimaginable to the frightened boy who had fled Hogwarts on a summer night in 1995. Now 19, he stood at the altar of Bulgaria's most ancient magical cathedral, watching his brother, for Viktor truly was his brother in every way that mattered, exchange vows with the woman who had become the sister of his heart. Hermione looked radiant in traditional Bulgarian wedding robes that somehow managed to be both elegantly simple and intricately beautiful. The deep blue fabric was embroidered with silver runes of protection and prosperity, and her hair was crowned with a circlet of mountain flowers that seemed to glow with their own inner light. Viktor, resplendent in the formal robes of his family's ancient lineage, couldn't take his eyes off her. "Do you, Viktor Dimitrov Krum, take this woman as your partner in magic and in life, to stand with her through all seasons of joy and sorrow, to build with her a legacy of love that will endure beyond your earthly days?" "I do," Viktor said, his voice carrying clearly through the cathedral's soaring spaces. "And do you, Hermione Jean Granger Krum, take this man as your partner in magic and in life, to stand with him through all seasons of joy and sorrow, to build with him a legacy of love that will endure beyond your earthly days?" Hermione's voice was steady and sure. "'Cause I do." Harry felt tears prick at his eyes as the ancient Bulgarian binding ceremony concluded with a shower of golden light that seemed to weave itself around the couple, marking them as magically wed in the eyes of both wizard-kind and the natural world. This was what love looked like when it was allowed to flourish without the shadow of war and death hanging over it. The celebration that followed was everything a wedding should be: joyful, hopeful, filled with laughter and dancing, and the kind of deep contentment that comes from watching people you care about choose happiness. Harry moved through the festivities with the easy confidence of someone who truly belonged, accepting congratulations on his role as Victor's best man, and deflecting the usual questions about his own romantic prospects with practiced humour. At 23, Victor had grown into his role as both a leader in Bulgarian magical society and a protector of those who needed sanctuary. His work with the International Magical Cooperation Committee had helped dozens of refugees find safety over the years, and his marriage to Hermione, now Dr. Hermione Krum, having completed her advanced magical studies at the University of Sofia, represented a union of two brilliant minds dedicated to making the world safer for everyone. As for Horry himself, he had found his calling in magical creature preservation. His work with the endangered dragon populations of the Carpathian Mountains had earned him recognition throughout Eastern Europe, and his research into protective ward applications had revolutionized how magical sanctuaries were established and maintained. Or it was fulfilling work that let him use his hard-won knowledge of defense magic for creation rather than destruction. But perhaps more importantly, it was work he had chosen for himself, based on his own interests and abilities, rather than someone else's vision of his destiny. The letter from Britain arrived 3 days after the wedding, delivered by a magnificent barn owl that Harry recognized as belonging to the Lovegood family. Luna's elegant script was instantly familiar, though the content of her message was something he had been both expecting and dreading. Dear Harry, I hope this letter finds you well and happy. The Raxperts around Ottery St. Catchpole have been particularly active lately, not probably because of all the emotions surrounding recent events. I wanted to tell you personally before you heard it from other sources. Voldemort is dead. He fell 2 days ago, defeated in a final battle at Hogwarts that cost us far too many good people. The war is over, but the price. Neville died a hero, leading the defence of the castle. So did Dean Thomas, Seamus Finnegan, and Lavender Brown. Colin Creevey never even made it to his 6th year. The Pattle twins died protecting younger students during an attack on the Hogwarts Express. Ginny survived, though she'll never be quite the same. She wanted me to tell you that she understands now why you left, and she hopes you've found the peace you were looking for. Ron and I are planning to marry in the spring. I know this might surprise you, but we found something together in the darkness of these past years that neither of us expected. He asked me to invite you to the wedding, if you think you can safely return to Britain for a few days. We would understand if you choose not to come. The Britain you would return to is not the one you left. Too much has changed. Too much has been lost. But if you did want to come, Ron says to tell you that Grimmauld Place has been restored and warded specifically to keep you safe. The Wizengamot has officially pardoned your departure, by the way. There was quite a debate about it, but in the end, they ruled that you had every right to seek sanctuary from persecution. Minister Kingsley. Yes, Kingsley Shacklebolt is minister now. Personally signed the proclamation. Whatever you decide, please know that your friendship has been one of the great treasures of my life. You chose to live when everyone else was asking you to die, and that choice has made all the difference. With love and admiration, Luna P.S. Ron wanted me to add that he's sorry it took him so long to understand why you had to go. He says he loves you like a brother and always will, no matter what. Harry set the letter down with shaking hands, the weight of 5 years of separation and loss settling over him like a familiar grief. So many names on Luna's list of the fallen, friends he had laughed with, learned with, grown up with, young people who had died fighting a war that had ultimately been won, but at such a terrible cost. He found Victor and Hermione in their garden, still glowing with newlywed happiness, despite the serious conversation they were having about their upcoming research trip to Romania. They looked up as he approached, and Hermione immediately noticed his expression. "Bad news from Britain?" she asked gently. "The war is over. Voldemort is dead." The words felt strange in his mouth after 5 years of safety and peace. But the cost, he handed them Luna's letter, watching their faces as they read. Victor's jaw tightened as he scanned the list of casualties, while Hermione's eyes filled with tears. "So many," she whispered. "So many children." "Luna and Ron are getting married," Harry continued. "They want me to come to the wedding." "And what do you want?" Victor asked carefully. Harry was quiet for a long moment, considering the question. What did he want? For 5 years, he had built a life in Bulgaria that was everything he had dreamed of as a child, safe, loving, full of possibilities, and free from the weight of others' expectations. He had a family who cherished him, work that fulfilled him, friends who valued him for himself rather than his fame. But he also had friends in Britain who had fought and suffered and lost people they loved, all while he was safe in his mountain sanctuary. Did he owe them something? Did he owe Ron and Luna his presence at their moment of joy, just as they had once shared in his moments of terror? "I think I want to go," he said finally. "Just for a few days. Just to see them, to let them see that I'm alive and well and happy." "Then we'll arrange it," Hermione said immediately. "Full diplomatic protection, limited exposure, or carefully planned security." "Actually," Harry interrupted, "I think I'd like to go alone, or nearly alone, maybe just with a small protection detail from the Bulgarian diplomatic corps." Victor and Hermione exchanged a worried glance. "Harry," Victor said carefully, "are you certain that's wise? Britain may have officially pardoned your departure, but there are still those who might see your return as an opportunity." "To do what?" "The war is over. Voldemort is dead, and I'm not the frightened boy who ran away 5 years ago." Harry's voice was steady, confident in a way it had never been during his Hogwarts years. "I'm Harry Krum, Bulgarian citizen, adult wizard, and someone who has learned how to protect himself. If I go back, it will be on my terms, for my reasons, and not because anyone else demands it." The conversation continued for several hours, but eventually Victor and Hermione agreed to support his decision. The Bulgarian ministry arranged everything: diplomatic immunity, discreet security, even a special portkey that would allow him to return to Bulgaria instantly if the situation became dangerous. 2 weeks later, Harry found himself standing in the garden of Grimmauld Place, looking around at the house that had once been Sirius's prison and was now, apparently, Ron and Luna's future home. The old Black family seat had been transformed almost beyond recognition. The dark, oppressive atmosphere replaced by warm light and living plants, the portraits of sneering ancestors covered by cheerful tapestries depicting scenes of nature and magic working in harmony. "Oh, Harry?" He turned to see Ron standing in the doorway, and for a moment neither of them moved. 5 years had changed Ron as much as they had changed Harry. He was taller, broader, with new scars and a gravitas that spoke of hard-won wisdom. But his smile, when it came, was exactly the same as Harry remembered. "Merlin's beard, look at you," Ron said, crossing the garden in quick strides. "You look good. Really good. Happy." The embrace that followed was fierce and emotional. 5 years of separation and regret and love, all wrapped up in a moment of pure connection. "I'm sorry," Ron whispered. "I'm so sorry it took me so long to understand why you had to go." "You don't have anything to apologize for," Harry replied, and meant it. "You stayed and fought. You protected people who couldn't protect themselves, or you were exactly who you needed to be. And you chose to live," Ron said, pulling back to study Harry's face. Luna was right. That took more courage than staying would have. The reunion with Luna was gentler, but no less emotional. She looked older, marked by loss and hardship, but there was a serenity about her that suggested she had found peace with the choices she had made. "You look like yourself," she observed, studying Harry with her usual directness. "For the first time since I've known you, you look like yourself, instead of like someone wearing Harry Potter's face." "I feel like myself," Harry admitted. "I feel like the person I was always supposed to be, as if I'd been allowed to grow up without prophecies and expectations and people trying to turn me into a weapon." They spent the afternoon sharing stories, Harry's tales of dragon conservation work and Bulgarian magical theory, Ron and Luna's accounts of the war years, and the slow work of rebuilding that was now underway. There were tears, especially when they talked about the friends who hadn't survived, but there was also laughter and the deep satisfaction of reconnecting with people who had known him in his darkest days and were overjoyed to see him happy. "What happens now?" Luna asked as evening fell and Harry prepared to return to Bulgaria. "Now I go home," Harry said simply. "Home to my family, my work, my life. But I'm glad I came. I'm glad to see that you're both well and happy and building something beautiful together." "Will you come back?" Ron asked. "For visits, I mean?" "Maybe," Harry said honestly, "when enough time has passed, when the wounds have healed a bit more. But Britain isn't home anymore, Ron. Bulgaria is. Viktor and Hermione and the Krums. They're my family now." "Good," Ron said fiercely. "You deserve a family that protects you instead of using you. You deserve everything you've found there." The journey back to Bulgaria felt like traveling from the past into the future. When Harry finally arrived at the mountain sanctuary that had been his first real home, he found Viktor and Hermione waiting for him on the terrace, their faces alight with a joy that had nothing to do with his safe return. "We have news," Hermione said. "They're practically bouncing with excitement." "Good news. Wonderful news." "You're pregnant," Harry said immediately, reading the glow in her expression and the protective way Viktor's hand rested on her still flat stomach. 3 months, she confirmed, tears of happiness streaming down her face. "We wanted to wait until we were certain. But—" Harry's whoop of joy echoed across the mountains as he swept both of them into an embrace that conveyed everything he felt. Love, gratitude, hope for the future, and the deep satisfaction of knowing that the next generation would grow up in peace. Later that evening, as they sat on the terrace sharing wine and planning the nursery, Harry reflected on the extraordinary journey his life had taken. 5 years ago, he had been a frightened, manipulated child running from a destiny others had written for him. Now he was a man who had chosen his own path, surrounded by family he had chosen, and who had chosen him in return. "Do you ever regret it?" Hermione asked, following his gaze toward the mountains that had sheltered them all these years. "Leaving Britain? Leaving everything behind?" "Never," Harry said without hesitation. "I regret the pain it caused people like Ron and Ginny. I regret the friends who died while I was safe. But the choice itself? The decision to live my own life instead of dying for someone else's cause? Never." "Good," Viktor said simply. "Because tomorrow I want to show you something special." The something special turned out to be a group of children, the youngest members of various families who had found sanctuary in Bulgaria over the years. Children whose parents had fled wars and persecution and dark wizards throughout Eastern Europe. They ranged in age from 6 to 12, and they all looked at Harry with the bright curiosity of young people who had never known him as anything but Uncle Harry, the dragon researcher who sometimes came to visit and always had the most interesting stories. "Uncle Harry," called Anya, the 8-year-old daughter of Romanian refugees who had fled Death Eater attacks. "Will you teach us that shield spell today? The one that looks like butterfly wings?" "Of course," Harry laughed, settling onto the grass beside them. "But first, let me tell you about the dragon family I visited last week." As he began his story, watching the children's faces light up with wonder and delight, Harry felt the last pieces of his healing click into place. But this was his legacy. Not the boy who lived, not a symbol or a weapon, but simply Harry, a man who had chosen love over duty and life over martyrdom, teaching the next generation to protect themselves and each other. In the distance, he could see Viktor and Hermione walking hand in hand through their garden, planning their future and the child they would soon welcome into a world finally free from the shadows of war. And for the first time in his life, Harry Potter, now Harry Krum, knew with absolute certainty that he was exactly where he belonged, doing exactly what he was meant to do, surrounded by the family he had always deserved. The boy who had once lived was now simply living, and it was more than enough. It was everything